Chapter 10:16. When the 10 days are over, all the challengers will be transported to the first level. When the time comes, we will gather again. You must make full use of the crystals in your hands to increase the overall benefits of the sect, Bing Wuxin reiterated. One last question. Suyu rubbed his chin. How big is the difference in the abilities of each story master? The slowing of time was a condition that became more and more difficult the higher one went in the martial tower. The strength of the floor master was also a possibility. Good question, Bing Wuxin praised. Suyu pretended to listen attentively. The inner sanctum disciples also pricked up their ears. But I don't know. After a pause, Bing Wuxin snorted in defiance. After all, it's fragments of information obtained from the conversations between the forces of the outer domains. It's rare and precious that you can understand so much about the martial tower. What's there to despise? Hee, if you're not good at communicating with others, just say so. It's such a simple matter. Why are you making it sound so difficult? Bing Wuxin sneered. Do you think it's as easy as you think? The extraterrestrial forces are extremely guarded against our blessed and heavenly lands. Let's not talk about those who are far away. The Heavenly Knife region, the Heavens Craftsman region, and the Central Prefecture region are guarding against us as if we were thieves. Even the Purple Cloud Palace, which is in the same prefecture, can't work together with us. Their understanding of the martial tower far surpasses ours. But have they ever revealed anything to us? I heard all this in secret. If it was done in the open, no one would tell us anything. Suyu shook his head in disbelief. Is that so? Let me try. You? There's not enough time, and it won't be easy for you to eavesdrop on anyone. Bing Wuxin didn't believe that Suyu could eavesdrop on more information about the martial tower. Any sane force wouldn't offer exclusive information to the enemy at such a critical juncture, right? Who said anything about secretly asking around? Suyu smiled and flew to the top of the martial tower. When most people's gazes were focused on the entrance of the first level, Suyu's actions were extremely conspicuous. Brother Su, I'm Su Yuxian, a student of the Red Blood Palace of the Blessed and Heavenly Lands of the Central Prefecture. I'm here to ask for the details of the martial tower. If you know anything, please let me know, Suyu said grandly. The audience was stunned for a moment. Then, many pairs of eyes looked at Suyu as if they were looking at an idiot. Lunatic, that's why I told you. What a joke. Who's stuffed? Let me tell you, Bing Wuxin and the inner sanctum disciples were flushed with embarrassment. F***CK, this level of embarrassment. All of them were itching to kill Suyu with their swords so that they could cut off all ties with him. Of course, I won't let you work for nothing. Here is Miss Dongfang's silk handkerchief. If I'm satisfied with your answers, I will give it to you. Suyu took out a silk handkerchief from his pocket. His disdainful gaze was like the sun and moon had been turned upside down. In an instant, a world-shaking change occurred. Passion, playfulness, and interest appeared in everyone's eyes. Dongfang Tianfeng was the only one who touched the silk handkerchief in her arms blankly, stunned on the spot. When did I give you a silk scarf? Our young Miss Dongfang was naturally unwilling to be used by others. Suyu looked at her with a smile. Miss Dongfang, have you forgotten? The silk handkerchief that you left behind when you were wiping your sweat from the pleasure of sex yesterday? Dongfang Tianfeng was taken aback. Wait a minute, what did he mean by having sex? Just as she was about to defend herself, she discovered that the challengers near the martial tower had a matter-of-fact expression on their faces. You've admitted it twice, so what's so strange about giving me a scarf? In particular, it was highly likely to be an original silk handkerchief that Miss Dongfang had used to wipe her body. Many perverts who were lovers of hardcore tastes were thoroughly defeated. The details of the martial tower are no secret. Brother Su, please listen to me. A 7th grade almighty man with a face full of pimples who looked like a beggar said with a chuckle. Toad script, if we're talking about being knowledgeable, you're not even fit to carry my shoes. Let me teach and pass on this magnificent feat of illuminating the world. A bunch of shameless people. How can filthy people like you get involved in such a bright and great undertaking? Brother Su, that original silk handkerchief. Cough. Oh, I mean that silk thing. I can vaguely sense the call of the great way of heaven and earth. Perhaps I can pry into the profound meaning of heaven and earth from this silk thing and achieve the supreme greatness of the martial path. I hope Brother Su can grant me a tenacious, indomitable heart of the martial path. Their shamelessness was constantly being refreshed, stimulating the senses of the crowd. Suyu easily obtained a large amount of information about the martial tower, which was more detailed than most of the individual influences. In the end, the silk handkerchief was taken by a young man who had a strong sense of justice in the world. The heavenly law silk handkerchief, which had caused an uproar, was taken. Where did you get that silk handkerchief? Why does it look so familiar? Bing Wuxin stared at it. Suyu shrugged. Of course it looks familiar to you. Isn't that what I use to wipe my feet? Anyway, I've pretty much understood the details of the martial tower. It's roughly the same as what you know, but there are a few important pieces of information that you don't know. So you didn't hide anything. First, the level masters of every story are the same. Upon hearing that, Bing Wuxin was greatly surprised. How is that possible? If the level masters are the same, what's the difference between the first 30 stories? The same level masters, the same time distortion, and the same difficulty level. There's no difference between a challenger passing one story and passing all 30. Instead, it's easier and more convenient to set it as a single story. This is the second important piece of information. The time limit is the same level of 30 stories. The higher you go, the stricter the time limit to defeat the level masters. For example, the first level master can be defeated within 2 hours, but the second level requires 3/4 of an hour, the third an hour, and so on. At the 30th story, it's likely that you'll need to kill them within seconds. This is where the difficulty of the martial tower lies. Bing Wuxin's expression turned grave. If that's the case, we're being too optimistic. The 30th story is a watershed. So you nodded. Yes, and there's one more thing that we need to be vigilant about. The martial tower can't defend against the disaster of books and martial arts. While we're challenging the levels, we're likely to have to endure disasters. The eyebrows of the inner sanctum disciples were twisted into knots. Holy sh*t, this was 100 times more difficult than they'd imagined. If they'd expected to get 60 points for passing, they'd now get 16 points. That's the detailed information. Suyu stood up and said, "The situation is very grim, so let's run, senior brothers and sisters." After this incident, Suyu's image in the eyes of the inner sanctum disciples improved tremendously. They all looked at him in a new light. Making friends with 2 Starry Sky elites in a day. TSK, Junior Brother Su is so popular. I can only envy and jealousy. I think Junior Brother Su has carried forward the Supreme Central Demon's spirit this time by forcing himself on the second daughter of the great Oriental family. Such a magnificent feat is worthy of the Supreme Central Demon's name. He should be a role model for all the disciples of the Red Blood Palace. Also, his strategy of casting a wide net to catch more fish is also a role model that we should learn from and follow. He has Bing Wuxin on the inside and Dongfang Tianfeng on the outside. He cultivates both internally and externally, enjoying the bliss of having 2 partners. Such an effective strategy deserves to be promoted and carried forward. I agree. Agree my ass. The group of female disciples were flushed with anger. Junior Brother has so many good points. How heroic, dignified, and upright he is. How can you sum him up to such an unbearable level? Tell me, are you spies sent by the enemy? Chapter 1017. Bing Wuxin looked on coldly from the sidelines. She didn't have to observe carefully to observe the mentality of the inner sanctum disciples. From being self-abased to being optimistic, the change was extraordinary. Haha, I really thought you were going to be cruel and unscrupulous to the Red Blood Palace, but it turns out that this is your intention. You're playing to the gallery and boosting the confidence of your fellow disciples. TSK. It's a pity that this bunch of idiots probably won't be able to appreciate it. Suyu flicked his fingertips, using cruel and unscrupulous to describe your bright and great junior brother. Even if you're my senior sister, I still think it's rude. Hee hee. Bing Wuxin was amused, staring at Suyu with great interest. Creak. After the commotion just now, the doors of the martial tower opened completely. 7 or 8 doors that could only be passed by one person opened at the same time. Swish! Several streams of turbulent, demonic energy separated the crowd and barged in domineeringly. The supreme heavenly demon faction is here. Get out of the way. 7 or 8 students of the supreme heavenly demon faction, including Han Fei, stepped in first. On the other hand, the students of the other factions weren't in a hurry to break in. They had 10 days, and a short while didn't matter. There was no need to fight. Moreover, once they entered, they could only move forward and couldn't retreat. Without complete preparation, it was best not to enter rashly. Let's wait for a while, too. It's not a bad idea to let the people of the supreme heavenly demon faction test the waters first. The specific strength of the story master is still unknown, Bing Wuxin suggested. Her character had always been one to press forward with an indomitable will. No matter the difficulties and obstacles, she would break them with a single strike of her sword. She was swift and decisive in her actions, and was rarely so indecisive. However, as the leader, she couldn't represent herself. She had to consider the whole team. How to make the team the safest was Bing Wuxin's priority. Don't wait. However, Suyu immediately suggested the opposite. Without waiting for Bing Wuxin's inquiry, Suyu took the lead and dashed towards one of the doors. Follow him. Bing Wuxin didn't hesitate at all. The moment Suyu dashed towards the door, she gave the order. In an instant, the group of more than 40 people from the Red Blood Palace rushed towards the martial tower. The quick-witted challengers in all directions immediately sensed an unusual scent. They had been orderly all this while, but now they had gathered together one after another. However, Han Fei, who was already halfway into the martial tower, looked back with a sneer. Rumble. The 8 doors rumbled at the same time. The disciples of the supreme heavenly demon sect who had entered first each pinched a talisman that contained the power of all creations. The talisman did not attack. Instead, it served as a support. However, it was precisely this effect that made people want to vomit blood. The power of all creations gently adhered to the door, forming an invisible wall that was like a transparent membrane, fusing with the martial tower. The special characteristic of the martial pagoda was that it was invulnerable. No external force could blast it open in the slightest. The function of the talisman was to use the formation to condense the power of all creations into a thin film and integrate it into the martial tower, forming a part of the martial tower. In this way, whenever an attack landed on the membrane, the martial pagoda would automatically recognize it and default to attacking the martial pagoda. The martial tower would strengthen the thin film on its own and raise it to the level of the other parts. The true strength of the martial pagoda was something that even immortal fairies would have to look at and sigh at. In this way, only the disciples of the supreme heavenly demon sect occupied the martial tower, and all other challengers were excluded. Such a domineering and unreasonable way of doing things in such a way that left no room for negotiation was really in line with the demonic path's temperament. It was also the supreme heavenly demon sect's usual style of doing things. The supreme heavenly demon faction. Aren't you afraid of retribution? The challengers who had attacked the door several times without success were enraged. No one had expected that this batch of disciples of the supreme heavenly demon faction would carry out such a bizarre and domineering move. The wails of the weak. Han Fei snorted in disdain. She turned around and was about to enter the martial tower to begin her training through the levels of the martial tower. However, she suddenly heard a voice that caused her body to tremble. Places for sale, places for the martial tower. Fresh places for the martial tower. Take a look, authentic places for the martial tower. Top-grade legendary cultivation techniques, semi-manufactured fairy artifacts, top-notch talismans, 6th-grade incredible elixirs. As long as you have them, you can trade for them. Suyu barged in almost immediately after the disciple of the supreme heavenly demon faction. The moment he took out the talisman, Suyu made his move. The silk in his sleeves cut the talisman into 2 just as it was about to explode. In this way, although the talisman still exploded, because the explosion was incomplete, there was a slight gap. A gap the width of a person was left on the thin film, allowing only one person to pass through. However, the thin film kept wriggling, trying in vain to repair the gap. However, there was a strand of silk at the gap of the thin film. Once the gap was closed, the silk would cut it, maintaining the gap at the size of a person. With Suyu's help, the inner sanctum students of the Red Blood Palace entered one after another. They stood behind Suyu, confused, excited, and relieved. At this moment, their gratitude and longing for Suyu soared straight to the heaven, until Suyu shouted out his peddling voice. "Su, what do you mean by this?" An 8th grade almighty followed closely behind the Red Blood Palace, wanting to barge in. In the end, Suyu retracted the silk, and the opening of the thin film shrunk to the width of half a person. The man hit the thin film head-on and was sent tumbling backward, landing on the ground in a difficult maneuver. When the thin film was closed until only a thin gap was left, Suyu operated the silk unhurriedly, maintaining the opening, and began to pester leisurely. Selling the places for the Marshall Tower? Everyone realized Suyu's intention. He was taking advantage of the situation, selling the places to enter the Marshall Tower while the people were unprepared. Tens of thousands of people were in a state of confusion, as if they had been struck by lightning. The students of the Supreme Heavenly Demon faction were even more dumbfounded. They were so angry that they vomited blood. "Suyu Xian, don't you have any shame? How can you use the talismans of the Supreme Heavenly Demon faction for profit?" Suyu said indifferently. "You could do it too. Who's stopping you? We want to, but you want us to be able to." This talisman was personally refined by the 10 great demon elders. "How can we cut open the thin film alone?" You quickly hand over the treasure that was cut open. "We are strictly against all forms of monopolization and possession, and all retrogressive actions that are detrimental to the unification of Jiuzhou as a whole. We express our stern condemnation of this." Suyu was stunned. What was with this familiar line? Coming back to his senses, Suyu waved his hand. "All right, come and get it." The students of the Supreme Heavenly Demon faction were dumbfounded. "You want us to be able to get out?" Once the thin film was opened, they couldn't break it at all. After all, there was the defense of the Marshall Tower. "See, based on the principle of mutual benefit, I launched a sincere cooperation deal with your faction, but your faction doesn't even have the sincerity to pay a visit to negotiate. I'm really powerless." When he finished, Suyu stood at the entrance of the thin film with a solemn and dignified face, scanning the 20,000 challengers outside. "Fat sheep. Oh, young people, show your sincerity, show your passion, and fight for the Marshall Tower. Just a book of top-grade legendary cultivation technique, just a semi-manufactured fairy artifact, and you can join the big family of the Marshall Tower. With a book of cultivation technique, you can't buy the deed to the central circle of the faction, you can't buy your beloved goddess, but you can buy it tomorrow in the Marshall Tower, a future with infinite possibilities. Fat sheep, what are you waiting for?" In the end, someone didn't even bother to cover up. The whole place reverberated with the heroic and impassioned peddling, shocking everyone's soul. "Damn it, shameless. What the F***CK? This is F***king shameless to the point of insanity. A book of top-grade legendary cultivation technique. This is like selling one's kidney." For a moment, the crowd was stirred up, denouncing the unforgivable person. Chapter 10:18. Are you out of your mind? Bing Wuxin was dumbfounded. In her mind, Suyu was a calm and shrewd man. Now, he was behaving in an absurd manner, a far cry from the Suyu she knew. She even suspected that Suyu might have been possessed by some mysterious outlander. Suyu chuckled. "If I wasn't crazy, how could I do anything?" Sure enough, he was plotting something. "What are you planning? Can't you see? I'm trying to win over the challengers from the Outlands and make them the allies of the Red Blood Palace." Suyu said matter-of-factly. "You should have seen that the Red Blood Palace is an overlord in the blessed and heavenly lands, but in the glittering jewel wonderland, it's a bottom feeder." Bing Wuxin didn't deny that. The Heavenly Knife region had suppressed almost the entire main force of the Red Blood Palace with only a few people. If the influences of the other regions were unscathed, they would be several times stronger than the Heavenly Knife region. According to Mo Tianxian, after every disaster, there will be a surge of opportunities. Do you remember how to carry the opportunities and increase the chances of obtaining them? So you asked. Bing Wuxin nodded deeply. Of course I remember. Killing. Killing could increase the chances of obtaining opportunities. If the challengers were killed before the disaster, the chances of obtaining opportunities would be higher. Now that the disaster of flowers is over and the disaster of books breaks out, we will probably hide in the Marshall Tower, so there's no need to worry. However, 10 days from now, when the Marshall Tower closes, it will be the third disaster, the Marshall disaster. Can you imagine what will happen if more than half of the challengers of the entire Dangerlands gather here? Who doesn't know that? Bing Wuxin looked to the Marshall Tower. When the Marshall Tower closes, the Marshall disaster will come. Whether it's to avoid the disaster or to obtain opportunities, blood will flow like a river and wars will break out everywhere. The Red Blood Palace is in the Marshall Tower, and I'm afraid we can't stay out of it. Bing Wuxin said, but what does that have to do with what you're doing? Roping us in? Instead, what I saw was a lot of hatred. The Marshall Tower is extremely valuable, and it might be worth a top-grade legendary cultivation technique or a semi-manufactured fairy artifact. But you'll also get hatred, and you'll suffer terrible revenge afterward, which is very different from your original intention. If Suyu simply closed the thin film, the rest of the challengers would give up and find another safe place to hide before the disaster of books and martial arts arrived. They were the ones who were incompetent and didn't manage to seize the first opportunity, which led to them being tricked by the supreme heavenly demon sect. They couldn't blame others. However, Suyu had left behind a crack that gave them hope. If he asked for a sky-high price now, he wouldn't be able to get any allies at all. He would only make more enemies. Those who are willing to exchange legendary cultivation techniques and semi-manufactured fairy artifacts are all fools. Such people are useless teammates, and I wouldn't want them even if they were given to me. Suyu laughed coldly. Only smart people know what I want. The clamor continued as tens of thousands of trial takers craned their necks and cursed. However, there were also some who were abnormally calm. This Su Yuxian is interesting. Bai Lingtian's lips curled into a smile. He stepped forward, and the crowd around him parted automatically. The crowd quietened down when an expert stepped forward. I can't help but sigh. The Red Blood Palace is really lucky to have a student like you. Bai Lingtian walked up to Suyu. Suyu shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly, but he didn't take it seriously in his heart. After all, Mo Tianxian was a woman who kept pestering him, and she wouldn't admit it even if she was beaten to death. We're both from the Central Prefecture. On behalf of the Heavenly Knife region, I'll give you the answer you want. Bai Lingtian took out an ancient scroll of the Heart's Oath and wrote the oath in blood. The challengers of the Heavenly Knife region hereby swear that before the Marshall disaster, they will never lay a hand on the subordinates of the Red Blood Palace. Otherwise, they will be plagued by inner demons. Bai Lingtian's identity and status were sufficient to represent the Heavenly Knife region. Under his call, the others also left their blood essence. Brother Su, are you satisfied? Bai Lingtian handed over the scroll of the Heart's Oath. The noisy crowd gradually quietened down as they finally understood Su Yu's true intentions. The clamoring for a deal was actually just to filter out those brainless idiots. Many people were secretly embarrassed. Those who had been cursing and swearing just now were like muted cannons, not saying a word. The louder they shouted, the more stupid they were. So he did not take it. Instead, he sneered and said, I am satisfied in general. However, there are 3 parts that need to be modified. Bai Lingtian's eyes gleamed. Go ahead, Brother Su. First, modify attacking to all hostile actions. Su Yu's finger pointed at the modified part. What if they didn't attack, but used their swords, knives, or divine techniques? Word games had to be guarded against. Second, the time limit covers the entire period of the glittering jewel wonderland. If they didn't strike before the martial disaster, they could strike after it. Third, based on my observation, the challengers of the Heavenly Knife region shouldn't be limited to the ones in front of us and the casualties. There's another batch of you who haven't arrived yet, right? They didn't leave their blood essence, so the scroll of the heart's oath can't restrain them. Therefore, I'll add one more rule. If any of the challengers of the Heavenly Knife region have any hostile actions, you will be held responsible. Bing Wuxin's eyes lit up. The careless loopholes had almost been fooled by the Heavenly Knife region. Bai Lingtian's lips curled into a bitter smile. The two loopholes were deliberate. However, he didn't expect to hide them from Su Yu completely. All right, but I have a question. The Heavenly Knife region will never take any hostile actions against you. What about the Red Blood Palace? Upon hearing that, many people turned their attention to him. They could swear an oath that they would never attack the Red Blood Palace. But what if the Red Blood Palace took the initiative to pick a fight with them? We? Haha, of course we won't be restrained. If you don't want to die, stay away from the disciples of the Red Blood Palace, as far as you can. So you said matter-of-factly. F*CK. So domineering. Even more so than the Heavenly Demon faction. What kind of oath is that? Due to the demons in their hearts, they can't take any hostile actions against the enemy, but the other party can attack them without any qualms. I'm afraid that even fighting back might be considered a violation of the oath. Even if they beat them back and kill them, they'll be haunted by the demons in their hearts, and it'll be hard for them to advance in the martial path. Su Yuxian, don't you think it's too much and shameless to propose such harsh conditions? Seeing that the crowd was riled up again, Su Yu said coldly, Too much and shameless? All I see is that I'm the one who gave you a chance to enter the Martial Tower. There's no such thing as a free lunch in the world. If you want to enter the Martial Tower, you'll naturally have to pay a certain price. The price is the risk. Moreover, I can promise that after the martial disaster, if you don't seek your own death, the people of the Red Blood Palace will never take the initiative to attack you. As for after the martial disaster, according to the data of previous batches, how many of you will have left? I'm afraid that before the Red Blood Palace can do anything, you'll have all died an unnatural death. Those who might really die at the hands of the Red Blood Palace are negligible. Dare I ask, is such a minuscule risk not enough to exchange for the opportunity to enter the Martial Tower? Having attracted more than half of the challengers to the Martial Tower, the rewards would surely be astonishing. Moreover, this batch of batches of the Supreme Heavenly Demon faction had acted out of character and done something that infuriated the heavens and the people by monopolizing the Martial Tower. It was obvious that the opportunities in the Martial Tower this time were even more impressive. After weighing the pros and cons, they had a clear idea of how to decide. After a moment of silence, Bai Ling Tian smiled bitterly. If possible, I really don't want to be enemies with Brother Su. Swish! Bai Ling Tian brushed his palm over and re-edited the Heart's Oath scroll. Su Yu accepted it with a smile. Please enter. The remaining people of the Heavenly Knife region entered with ugly expressions. In this way, if they encountered the students of the Red Blood Palace in the glittering Jewel Wonderland, they would be the only ones who could fight and kill them. Apart from fleeing, they couldn't even resist. This was tantamount to putting a dog collar around their necks. A sense of grievance filled everyone's hearts, as if they had eaten a bowl of live flies. On the other hand, the students of the Red Blood Palace were inexplicably excited. This was tantamount to a trump card that could violate the rules infinitely. The 20,000 challengers present would only allow the Red Blood Palace to kill them, and they wouldn't even be allowed to fight back. Apart from fleeing, there was nothing they could do. Next, if one of them happened to be excavating a treasure trove, any small fry of the Red Blood Palace could run in and shoot their mouths. Regardless of whether the opponent was the number one expert of the region, they would have no choice but to get lost. What? You're not getting lost? Fine, I'll cut you down with my sword. What? You're going to fight back? Fine, the Heart's Oath scroll was here. As long as they didn't run into the other 20,000 challengers, the Red Blood Palace could totally do whatever they wanted in the glittering Jewel Wonderland. Such a great trump card was like a dream to them. Looking at Su Yu's back, their longing was about to rush up to the heavens and worship him like a god. Bing Wuxin was dumbfounded when she understood Su Yu's intentions. The effect of this ally was strong, very strong, so strong that she would be tied up and be at their mercy. This isn't making allies, is it? Bing Wuxin said uncertainly. It's more like setting up a dog collar. No matter how surprised, indignant, angry, or annoyed the outsiders were, they had no other choice. Besides, Su Yu had promised not to attack them before the disaster of martial arts. If there was a chance to escape after the disaster of martial arts, as long as they weren't too unlucky and didn't run into this bunch of cheating bastards, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. All right, surnamed Su, remember this. I'll sign it too. I refuse. Su Yu waved his hand. Why? The one who had been rejected was indignant. Because you don't have a grateful heart. I'm the one who gave you a chance. Even if you have to pretend, shouldn't you put on a grateful expression? Next. I'm from the South Sand Continent's Black Dragon domain. Thank you, Brother Su, for giving us the opportunity to enter the Martial Tower. We're very grateful. This is the Heart's Oath Scroll. Please have a look. That's more like it. Go on in. Just like that, the people who had eaten a fly entered the Martial Tower one after another after handing over the Heart's Oath Scroll. Except for a small number of low-level martial artists who felt that they had no hope of ascending to the higher levels and that signing the contract wasn't worth it, they left one after another. In the end, only a familiar crowd was left. The Purple Cloud Palace. At this moment, the students of the Purple Cloud Palace had mixed feelings. Once upon a time, they had watched the Red Blood Palace being tortured by the Heavenly Knife region with smiles on their faces. In the end, in just a short while, the salted fish had made a comeback. No, it was more than a salted fish had made a comeback. He had used the Supreme Heavenly Demon faction to seize the throats of more than half of the challengers and become a lawless cheat. It would be a lie to say that they weren't jealous and envious. Chapter 1019. They shared the same breath with the Red Blood Palace, and there was no great enmity between them. The two factions were considered allies. Even if they signed the Heart's Oath Scroll, the Red Blood Palace would not deliberately kill them. But they would be humiliated. It would be a pity to give up the Martial Tower just like that. The Martial Tower was the easiest place for all challengers to obtain benefits. It had been so since ancient times, and it would be a pity to give it up now. Thinking of this, many of the Purple Cloud Palace students secretly regretted their decision. If they had stood up when the Heavenly Knife region humiliated the Red Blood Palace, the situation might have been much better. After a long silence, Lu Chuyi bit her lip and stepped forward to look at Su Yu. Junior Brother Su, do we also need to sign the Heart's Oath Scroll? Of course. Bing Wuxin was the one who answered, showing no mercy. When the Heavenly Knife region attacked them, the gloating expressions of the Purple Cloud Palace were deeply etched in her mind. Retribution had finally come. Did I ask you? Lu Chuyi, who was as gentle as she was, spoke harshly with a hint of hostility. Bing Wuxin was taken aback. She was baffled by this inexplicable hostility. It's the same if you asked him. Bing Wuxin sneered. Su Yu's heart was even colder than hers. Su Yu shook his head. Of course it's different if you asked me. Bing Wuxin was surprised and looked at Lu Chuyi in confusion. Her woman's intuition told her that the inexplicable hostility had a source. The source was Su Yuxian, who was beside her. Lu Chuyi's pretty face blushed a little. Although she had expected Su Yu to agree, she could not help but feel strange. Please go back. My vital energy is limited, and I can't support the crack for too long. I'm sorry, Su Yu said expressionlessly. He raised his wrist and released the crack. The thin membrane repaired itself and merged with the Martial Tower. Lu Chuyi felt as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. She froze on the spot, and the smile on her face gradually faded, replaced by a look of disbelief. She could feel that Su Yuxian was the other man in the depths of her heart, Su Yu. Perhaps she was used to him doing everything reasonable for her. So, when he suddenly rejected her, she was at a loss as to what to do and was at a loss. We have nothing to do with each other anymore. Besides, Will you really sign the Heart's Oath scroll? Suyu shook his head, turned, and disappeared into the ancient tower. Anyone could sign the Heart's Oath scroll, but Gu Taishu was the only exception. Firstly, he was arrogant, so how could he be willing to lower his head to Suyu? Secondly, once he signed it, it would be the day of his death. Only Suyu could kill him, and he wouldn't even be allowed to retaliate. So, how could he make such a vow to seek his own death? There is only one explanation for allowing Lu Chuyi to test him. Lu Chuyi had a killer move on her. The target didn't have to be Suyu. Anyone could do it. Once successful, they could disrupt Suyu's plans. Then, he would use his magical powers to force his way into the Martial Tower and recruit the people of the Purple Cloud Palace without wasting a single soldier or clan. Even though Gu Taishu didn't know that the thing supporting the crack was a silk invisible to the naked eye, and he couldn't control the gap whether he could enter the Martial Tower or not. Lu Chuyi was stunned for a while. Tears welled up in her eyes, but there was no resentment. She had chosen Gu Taishu. What else could she say? Trash. When he returned to Gu Taishu's side, what he received was a public rebuke. Since 3 days ago, when Gu Taishu came back saying that he needed to run some errands, his attitude had changed drastically. He scolded and scolded them at every turn, far from being as gentle and considerate as before. Although she didn't know the reason, Lu Chuyi, who had a guilty conscience, didn't dare to resist. She just endured it silently. Moreover, she firmly believed that she hadn't made the wrong choice. Let's go. The Beast Yard is the last and most important stop of the glittering jewel wonderland. Gu Taishu turned and said, the Martial Tower was useful to him, but it was limited. His real goal was the Beast Yard. Throughout Jojo, the Beast Yard of the glittering jewel wonderland was the only way to find the last type of blood of the real spirit. Once the body of 9 spirits was completed, no Starry Sky elites or Mo Tianxian would be a match for him. You're so determined to reject your lover. Are you worried that I'll be jealous? Bing Wuxin asked with a smile. Suyu shook his head. Let's go. We've been delayed for 4 hours. The students of the Red Blood Palace all entered the Martial Tower and began their journey through the Martial Tower. Swish! As soon as he entered the Martial Tower, he sensed a space power that transported him to another independent space. Bing Wuxin, who was beside him, was transported as well. She was alone. The surroundings were bright, and it looked like a simple arena. In the center of the arena, there was a lifelike puppet that looked like a human. Because it was lifelike, Suyu was dumbfounded. If he hadn't realized that he was in the glittering jewel wonderland, Suyu would have pounced on it. Mo Tianxian. That puppet was Mo Tianxian. Compared to the Mo Tianxian that Suyu knew, it was much more immature. It looked only 18 or 19 years old, just like a teenage girl. However, its temperament and facial features were all Mo Tianxuan's. He suddenly recalled another piece of information he had received. The story masters changed every time because it was decided by the challenger who had passed the most stories in the previous year. The previous king of the story masters would be recorded by the Martial Tower and be set as the next story master. Mo Tianxian was the most powerful challenger who had passed the Martial Tower 100 years ago. Seeing her, a smile appeared at the corner of Suyu's mouth. You when you were a teenager? I can't beat you now, but I can deal with you when you were a teenager. With a wicked smile, Suyu walked into the arena. The puppet didn't move an inch. Just as the information said, the story master won't attack unless an attack is launched, right? Suyu nodded. He retrieved 8 round balls and placed them around the young girl, Mo Tianxian. With the meteor light stream great formation, it could be used as a defense. After all, no one knew what kind of strength Mo Tianxian had displayed in the Martial Tower. In the process of setting up, Suyu clearly found that his movements were much slower. Not only his movements, but even his thoughts were slowed down. Compared to the outside world, it was about 30% slower. This was the Martial Tower's biggest obstacle, the distorted and slow time. Here, all the challengers would enter a slow-motion state. Let's begin. Suyu was ready. From a certain distance, he shot a sword of vital energy at Mo Tianxian. When the sword of vital energy was within 30 feet of her, Mo Tianxian who had her eyes closed, finally reacted. A pair of eyes slowly opened, and two powerful streams of air shot out from them. The sword of vital energy dissipated in an instant. At the same time, waves of demonic energy billowed out from Mo Tianquan's body. The bestial demonic beast transformed from demonic energy roared and rushed toward Suyu. Suyu was unfazed. He displayed the 9 dragons' demon subduing art. 6 demonic dragons roared and roared as they rushed forward to fight the demonic beasts. Right at that moment, Suyu felt a sudden chill. It was Mo Tianxian holding a black, broken sword. She broke through the demonic energy gracefully and slashed towards the area where Suyu was. Suyu chuckled. The sword could roughly determine Mo Tianquan's cultivation at that time. In terms of vital energy storage alone, it was equivalent to a 9th grade almighty. But in terms of the power of the sword, it was far beyond her cultivation. The space of the martial tower was swept by the sword, and the piercingly cold sword energy even shook the space of the martial tower. This was definitely the strength of an all-creations old monster. In terms of strength alone, it was no less than the top expert in the region, on par with by Ling Tian, Gu Taishu, and the others. However, it didn't mean that Gu Taishu only had such strength when she was a young girl. After all, what the martial tower had copied was only the strength that Mo Tianxian had displayed. There was still hidden strength that could not be copied. The sword energy slashed towards him, but Suyu was already prepared. Rise! Boom! Boom! All of a sudden, the few round pearls placed under Mo Tianquan's feet began to rotate, forming the meteor light stream great formation. The formation produced a powerful sucking force, and Mo Tianxian was suppressed in the center. Even the sword energy that was slashed out was sucked back by the formation and forcibly crushed by the 8 rotating round pearls, sweeping the world with a single sword. Mo Tianxian spoke suddenly. The pitch-black, broken sword in her hand suddenly erupted with an extremely intense demonic energy. The demonic energy turned into millions of swords, shooting towards Suyu like a dark cloud. The scene greatly surprised Suyu. The second realm of the Path of Swords, the imperishable sword body. Mo Tianxian is also an expert of the Path of Swords. Suyu discovered an unknown secret. According to the rumors of the continent, Mo Tianxian had nothing to do with the Path of Swords. Since her fame spread across the continent, she had relied on the flying guillotine to dominate the world. There had never been any rumors of her using a sword. The puppet Mo Tianxian before him had shattered Suyu's understanding. The imperishable sword body was the supreme realm of the Path of Swords that not many people in the Jiuzhou continent could achieve. Combined with her cultivation, her strength was superb. The most vivid example was Bing Wuxin. She was a 9th grade fairy, but how powerful was the imperishable sword body? Not to mention a 9th grade almighty. Even an old monster who had just entered the all-creation realm would not dare to be careless. Since Mo Tianxian was the best in all creations, if she used the invincible sword body, her power would be amplified several times. How impressive would that be? Suyu had to reconsider his plan to settle scores with Mo Tianxian after he returned to the outside world. This woman, she's the one who hides the most. Suyu thought to himself. It was as if he had discovered Mo Tianquan's greatest secret. The undying sword body broke through the meteor light stream formation and pounced towards Suyu. Suyu's expression was calm. There was no one here, so he could display his abilities to his heart's content. He had finally found a place to test his sword. With a flip of his hand, the sword case on Suyu's back opened, and the 3 long swords, which shone with a silver light, vibrated continuously. The terrifying sword chi that had emitted soared into the sky along with the silver light. The 1,000 light swords were shattered by the unparalleled sword chi. Suyu unsheathed a sword backhandedly. Without any technique, he slashed the sword at Mo Tianquan's puppet. There was no sword chi, not even the sound of a sword ringing. However, Mo Tianquan's puppet, along with the broken sword in its hand, was like a bubble turning illusory inch by inch. Dingling! With a crisp sound, two objects fell out of the illusory space. One of them was a round crystal ball the size of a palm. It was probably the crystal, the reward for defeating the story master. There was a small star carved on the crystal. It was a one-star crystal. The other object was a bone. There were a few lines of numbers carved on it. It was the number of points that Suyu had obtained by clearing the first story. Could this bone be the vessel for recording the points? Suyu stared at the bone and thought about it seriously for a moment before putting it into his pocket. After cleaning up the mess, Suyu did not immediately enter the second story. Instead, he stayed where he was, lost in thought. Chapter 10:20. After a brief analysis, Mo Tianchuan's puppet was not difficult to deal with. She was unable to take the initiative to attack and had a weak defense. If the trial takers were prepared enough, they would be able to take the initiative and destroy her in one strike the moment she initiated an attack. The problem was that there were still 99 levels. Even the 4 Starry Sky prodigies could not guarantee that they would be able to grasp the opportunity on every level. What's more, there was a strict time limit to the next level. It would become shorter and shorter. On the 30th, 60th, and 90th floors, the requirement was instant kills. Therefore, it seemed like the Martial Pagoda left enough opportunities for the trial takers, but in reality, almost no one could clear the 100 floors. What he didn't know was that in the instant he chopped down with his silver sword, all the trial takers in the Martial Tower felt the space they were in trembling violently. It seemed that the power of the neighboring space was too great and the tremors were transmitted over. As for those trial takers who hadn't gone far and had given up on the Martial Pagoda, they were even more shocked to discover that somewhere on the first floor of the Martial Pagoda, which was said to be invulnerable, there was actually a crack. After resting for a while, Suyu entered the second level. Apart from the words second level in the room, it was almost no different from the first level. It was the same Mo Tianxian puppet with the same degree of time slowing. The only difference was that he had to defeat his opponent within an hour. This time, Suyu did not intend to probe. After setting up the Meteor Light Stream Great Formation, Suyu added the 9th round pearl, the Underworld Pearl. After putting some distance between them, Suyu shouted anxiously, "Rise!" Almost at the same time, Mo Tianxian opened her eyes. Her first move was the shape-shifted demonic beast that was formed by the surging demonic energy. However, the formation that was activated was instantly wiped out. At the same time, Mo Tianxian took out the mysterious black broken sword and tried to block one of the pearls. As long as one of the pearls stopped spinning, a loophole would appear in the formation. Unfortunately, the one she intercepted was the one that should not have been intercepted. Puff! The Underworld Pearl turned Mo Tianxian into nothingness as if it was hitting a piece of tofu, leaving behind a 2-star crystal ball and a bone. Standing on the spot, Suyu fell into deep thought. Initially, he thought that Mo Tianxian was just a simple puppet that would act according to a predetermined program. However, the action of using the sword to block the bead just now was clearly not a mechanical program. A bright light flickered in Suyu's eyes. On the 3rd floor, Suyu adjusted the method of the Meteor Light Stream Great Formation and placed the Underworld Pearl in the center. As a result, once it was activated, Mo Tianxian was killed instantly before she could react. Using this method, Suyu challenged all the way to the 30th floor. According to the time limit of the 30th floor, he completed the instant kill and successfully passed the 30th floor. With a smile on his face, Suyu stepped into the 31st floor. As soon as he entered this level, Suyu immediately felt that his movements had become even slower. Compared to the outside world, time was more than 60% slower. Under such conditions, Suyu tried to set up the formation and defeat Mo Tianxian. Of course, he succeeded. The problem was that the speed at which the Meteor Light Stream array operated was much slower than the previous 30 levels. As a result, it took 2 breaths of time to complete the killing. However, Mo Tianchuan's puppet was not affected at all compared to the previous 30 levels. It would be very difficult to get past the 60th level, and if one failed, one would be eliminated. If it were an outsider, they would be helpless and would have to rack their brains to think of a strategy. But to Suyu, the power of time, humph. At the 60th level, Suyu's left eye turned dark purple as he activated the power of time. The flow of time around him accelerated by 3 times. A mere 60% of the time-slowing factor was not only offset, but also sped up by more than 9 times. With a whooshing sound, Suyu successfully passed the level without any suspense. There are only 40 levels left. At the 90th level, I need to kill instantly. According to my calculations, from a 93rd level onwards, time will be slowed down by 2 times, and the 94th level will be slowed down by 3 times. From the 95th level onwards, time will be slowed down by 4 times. At such a slow speed, there is no objective condition for killing instantly. For the last 10 levels, I only need to pass them. I only need to use time acceleration once at the 90th level, Suyu analyzed. Suyu's magical power of time acceleration could only be used once a day. Therefore, when he reached the 89th level, Suyu had to stop and rest for a day. The next day, when he recovered, Suyu had reached the 90th level. However, the puppet on the 90th level was not Gutaishu. It was a tall, beautiful woman with a long sword on her back. The young woman gave off a very strange feeling. There was no sharpness about her. Because of this, she gave off an unfathomable feeling. Staring at the woman, Suyu thought to himself, Mo Tianchuan's puppet didn't show up at this level, which means that she failed at the 90th level. This woman should be a proud lady who reached this level earlier than Mo Tianxian. Mo Tianxian didn't manage to break her record, so she's still here. After thinking for a while, Suyu imitated Gu Taishu and performed the Meteor Light Stream Great Formation to kill instantly. However, the moment the opponent opened her eyes, Suyu felt a chill run down his spine. He felt as if thousands of swords were piercing through his body, and he was doomed eternally. Just one look contained the ultimate way of the sword. The realm of the way of the sword was like the realm of the undying sword body, but it was more complete and profound. Who was this person? Suyu was shocked. In terms of swordsmanship, this woman was extraordinary and unparalleled. 100 years had passed. If this woman had not died, she should not be a nobody. Etching this woman's portrait in his mind, Suyu entered the 91st level, the last 10 levels. On the 91st level, it was still the woman with a sword. The Meteor Light Stream Great Formation killed her instantly, not giving her a chance to strike. Up to the 95th level, time acceleration could not resist the slow time, and Suyu could only resist it with all his might. Fortunately, the Heavenly Orchid Silver Bamboo Sword was invincible and could cut through anything. The woman had not even launched a powerful move before she was destroyed by Suyu. Even so, Suyu still had to bear a few whiffs of the sword. He looked fine on the outside, but his body was filled with sword energy, destroying his internal vitality. As a result, Suyu had no choice but to swallow the fountain of life to replenish his vitality. Otherwise, he would die from the extinction of his vitality before he could walk out of the martial tower. After resting for a moment, he dispelled the sword energy in his body. Looking up at the 96th level, Suyu fell into deep thought. From the next level onwards, time acceleration could not offset the slow time in the martial tower. According to the records, the time acceleration on the 96th level would be 4 times faster than the outside world, which was beyond Suyu's endurance limit. As long as the woman with the sword was given a chance to strike, with her swordsmanship alone, how many people in the world could stop her? However, Suyu was still confident that he could continue to pass. With a thought, he was automatically transported to the 96th level. However, what he saw was no longer the woman with her amazing swordsmanship, but empty. On the arena, there was nothing. Suyu, who had been mentally prepared, was stunned. Where's the story master? What are you shouting for? The story master has gone home to eat. If there's anything, come back tomorrow. A slightly familiar voice floated over from the void. Suyu squinted and looked around. So, I've passed the level? In your dreams. You didn't see the story master, so how can you pass the level? The voice floated over. Suyu said, "The challenger arrived according to the rules, but the story master was not there. Naturally, it is the story master's responsibility. The challenger passed the level unconditionally. What you say doesn't count. Cut the crap and go back." Suyu sneered. The glittering, jewel-mortal fairy has fallen for ages. The rules she set have become invalid. Are you reduced to the point of changing them at will? The air was filled with silence. After a long while, a sigh was heard. "Fine, you pass. Where's the reward?" Suyu looked at his feet. Reward? Without the story master, where would the reward come from? Stop fooling around and go home to eat, the voice said. Suyu did not move an inch and maintained his cold smile. Without the story master, is the Martial Tower's dereliction of duty. What does it have to do with me? Since I have passed the level, the crystal ball and the bone must be given. Hey, how dare you talk back to me? Aye. The voice sighed helplessly. Without the story master, I can't do anything about it. Why don't you go up for a tour for free? According to the rules of the Martial Tower, there will only be rewards if there is a story master. Without the story master, I can't give out any rewards. Story master, can't you just call them back? Well, they are on a long vacation. No one expected anyone to climb up to the 96th story, right? If they can't come, can't you just take their place? So you never asked about the identity of the speaker. I am the tower spirit of the Martial Tower, a wisp of illusory spiritual intelligence. The story master needs a real body. How can I be the story master? Spiritual intelligence? Haha, you can fool others with that, but can you fool me? So you stamped his feet. Why didn't I know that a spiritual intelligence could manipulate the Great Formation at will and trap all the challengers in the illusionary Great Formation, playing with them in the palm of its hand? How did you know? Oh, what nonsense are you talking about? Why can't I understand a word of it? There was a hint of panic in the voice. Suyu looked around and said lightly, "Do you still need me to point it out when you've already said it? In fact, all the challengers, including me, have been stuck at the first story all along. No one has ever gone beyond the second story, right? Along the way, the only changes on every story are the numbers on the wall and the time limit, as well as the changes in the compressed time. All of this is a transformation of illusions." Suyu revealed a secret that was neither too big nor too small. The voice in the void said angrily, "What a joke. A mere illusion can fool the eyes and ears of one person. But how can it fool the eyes and ears of 20,000 people? It can fool one generation. But how can it fool hundreds of generations? Among the previous generations of geniuses, there must be people who have achieved great mastery of the eye technique. If it was an illusion, they would have seen through it long ago." Suyu said disdainfully, "When did I say that this illusion is to confuse the eyes?" The voice in the void was inexplicably flustered. Nonsense. Isn't an illusion supposed to confuse the eyes? The so-called illusion was to deceive the brain through the eyes and make a wrong judgment. That's just the understanding of the people of this world. In ancient times, illusion techniques were multiplied to the extreme and were widely used. There were countless illusion techniques that targeted hearing, smell, and other senses. It's just that very few of them have been passed down to this world and are not known by people. Back in Tinya City, so you had read a large number of ancient texts and gained a lot of knowledge. The voice in the void tried to defend himself. Haha, touch, listen, and smell. How is this an illusion technique? Suyu said sarcastically. That's because this is an even more mysterious illusion technique. The illusory truth technique. Do I still need to explain? Once you explain it clearly, the illusory truth technique will be broken without any attack. I'm curious to know what interesting things will happen next. The voice in the void fell silent. After a moment, an angry and helpless sigh was heard. Damn it, you win. Here you go. Ding dong. A round pearl and a bone fell to the ground. They were the rewards for passing the 96th story and the 96th story. Is that enough? The man said angrily. Suyu smiled amiably. These two things are exactly what I want, of course. It's still not enough. I want to continue to challenge the 97th story all the way to the 100th story. Chapter 10:21. Actually, the so-called illusory truth technique is... Suyu looked around and explained leisurely. That's enough. Don't provoke me. The voice in the dark was enraged. Suyu was fearless. So what if I provoke you? If you really have the ability to suppress me, why you have to compromise? Come out and chop me into pieces long ago. I want a reward. I've never seen a challenger as shameless as you. With a plop, the entire space suddenly split open like a piece of cloth, disintegrating and dissipating like bubbles. It was replaced by an extremely vast hall. Wasn't this the first story of the Marshall Tower? As far as the eye could see, the first story of the Marshall Tower was densely packed with people standing with their eyes closed. Bing Wuxin, Bai Ling Tian, and even Han Fei were among them. All of them had their eyes tightly shut, trapped in a nightmare. They seemed to have entered some kind of environment and couldn't wake up. They were motionless. However, Suyu caught a glimpse of a living creature from the corner of his eye. A dog? A black dog? Suyu was startled. In a hall full of people, a completely black dog was running back and forth, and it looked very familiar. It's you. Suyu suddenly remembered the black dog that spoke human language when they gathered in front of the Marshall Tower. The black dog was running merrily in the middle of everyone, its eyes glowing with green light as it yelled, "Oh my God, this guy's made it to the 90th story. I'm afraid he'll wake up on his own if he goes up a few more stories." The black dog's green light had a very obvious hypnotic effect. Many of the people who were shaking and showing signs of waking up immediately fell into a state of stillness after being shrouded by the green light. So you could see clearly that this was the power of the illusory truth technique. As long as the black dog continued to maintain it, these people would never be able to escape from the environment, and the space would be torn apart like what Suyu had done just now. What caught Suyu's attention was that the person who had made it to the 90th story was none other than Han Fei. Suyu was secretly surprised. He had the power of time distortion, which could slow down time against the illusion. But how did Han Fei do it? Suyu couldn't feel any power of time from her. The only explanation was that Han Fei had forcefully made it to the 90th story with her strength alone. This woman's strength was a little too terrifying. Crap. The 93rd story. Not good, not good. The black dog roared anxiously. In just a short moment, Han Fei had made it to level 93. Once he entered the deserted 96th floor, he would probably discover the truth behind the 100-story Marshall Tower, just like Suyu. The Marshall Pagoda had never been opened and remained on the first floor. Brat, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and come over to help. That woman is 2F** King Ferocious. She swallowed all the puppets. The black dog turned pale with fright. Suyu replied calmly, "You're the one who's making things difficult for her when she wakes up. What does it have to do with me?" The black dog was annoyed. "Of course it has nothing to do with you. However, the number of crystal balls on the 100th floor is limited. When she wakes up and asks for it, should I give it to you or her? Or did she kill you in advance? End it all? If I remember correctly, she didn't sign that stupid agreement with you, did she?" Suyu pondered for a moment. Up until now, I still don't know what kind of reward the crystal ball will draw. Whether it is necessary to compete with her or not is still up for discussion. Negotiate my ass. The crystal ball on the 100th floor has a 100% chance of drawing a low-grade fairy artifact, a 50% chance of drawing a middle-grade fairy artifact, and a 10% chance of drawing a top-grade fairy artifact. You have enough fairy artifacts, so if you could just give them away, forget what I said." The black dog exclaimed. "Damn dog, why didn't you say so earlier?" Suyu was shocked. Semi-manufactured fairy artifact and fairy artifact. The difference of one word was like heaven and earth. If an analogy had to be made, it was like the difference between a girlfriend and a girlfriend. The latter had an extra word, but it was 10,000 times more devastating to a single dog. So you didn't care much for semi-manufactured fairy artifacts. The 3 silver swords on his back were all semi-manufactured, but fairy artifacts were something that could only be encountered by chance. "How can I help?" Suyu asked. The black dog said it's simple. Strip her naked and train her so that her mind will waver and she will be defeated by the puppets. Get lost. So you kicked. Even if he could do it, once she wakes up and finds a big worm wriggling on her body, she would probably skewer the worm into 100 skewers and roast it. Why don't I be the story master? So you said with a smile. Since the story master wasn't here, how difficult would it be to add a story master at the last minute? What? You want to go in and fight this fierce woman? I'll raise both my paws in approval. The black dog sincerely admired Su Yu's selflessness. Su Yu snorted. Damn dog, it's just an illusory technique to you. You must have a record of the images I left in the Marshall Tower just now. Hee hee. The black dog laughed dryly, meaning, so you're not stupid after all. Give me a drop of blood essence. Only blood essence can create illusions. After offering a drop of blood essence, the black dog held it in its mouth, and a hint of blood flashed across its emerald eyes. In the Marshall Tower, Han Fei fought her way to the 95th story like a hot knife through butter. Jian Wuxing in her teenage years has actually reached the 95th story. Impressive indeed, Han Fei said indifferently, but her tone sounded like she was commenting on it. I'll reach all the stories that have been reached by the previous prefecture kings, and I'll reach those that haven't been reached yet. Han Fei said casually, as if passing through the 95th story was as easy as walking on flat ground. With a shift of thought, she was transported to the 96th story, one of the last 5 stories. When she opened her clear eyes, the figure that entered her eyes startled her. Are you Su Yuxian? Han Fei's indifferent face revealed a look of surprise. She had thought that the next story would be the prefecture kings of the previous era, if not Jian Wuxing. But it was Su Yuxian. Why did Su Yuxian become a story master? Han Fei looked around, suspicion rising in her heart. Her real body in the outside world was trembling incessantly, showing signs of seeing through the illusory technique and awakening. Once Han Fei realized that she was in an illusory realm, the illusory technique would crumble on its own. Su Yuxian has cleared the 100th story and become the new story master. The deep, ethereal voice of the black dog sounded in the Marshall Tower. Han Fei frowned, taken aback. He cleared the 100th story? Han Fei couldn't believe it. If Bai Ling Tian had cleared the 100th story, she might not have been so surprised, but Su Yuxian, puzzled, Han Fei sized Su Yu up carefully for a moment. Fine, let me try out the new story master's technique. A pitch-black sun appeared above Han Fei's head, sucking in everything around it like a black hole. The whole space was trembling incessantly. Once the technique was launched, the sucking force was not weak or strong. That was why it wasn't affected by time at all. She only had to launch the technique and wait for the sucking force to reach the critical point so that she could swallow the puppet. Su Yu opened his eyes slowly, his left eye flickering with purple brilliance. Han Fei clearly sensed that time and space, which was originally 4 times slower than the outside world, had suddenly slowed down to 7 times. The sucking vortex had slowed down to its limit, unable to quickly swallow everything in its surroundings. At the same time, Su Yu drew out a sword and slashed it casually. Creak! The black hole was annihilated. Han Fei wanted to block it, but the cheat-like speed of 7 times slower made her thoughts and actions extremely slow. She could only watch helplessly as the sword pierced into her body. Crack! With a soft sound, Han Fei was torn into pieces. But the challenge wasn't over yet. The annihilated black hole condensed again, and a pair of snow-white arms extended from it. Shortly after, Han Fei, dressed in a black dress, appeared before him unscathed. The power of this sword is comparable to that of an all creations. Han Fei had no expression on her face as she commented indifferently. Su Yuxian is much stronger than I expected. Given time, he might be qualified to be my sparring partner. When she finished speaking, Han Fei waved her hand. All of a sudden, 9 black blazing suns appeared in the sky. Including the previous one, there were a total of 10 suns. Boom! An unprecedented sucking force erupted from the 10 black suns. In the blink of an eye, Su Yuxian's puppet was swallowed up completely. Dong! A crystal and a bone were left on the spot. Picking up the item, Han Fei's red lips curled slightly, revealing a hint of anticipation. With a shift of her thoughts, she descended onto the 97th level. What she saw was still Su Yuxian's puppet. In the outside world, the black dog cursed angrily. F***CK? This fierce woman is definitely cheating. What's with the 10 black suns that broke the rules? Even stage 3, all creations, old monsters would be scared witless. Damn it, for my food, I'll fight you to the death. The black dog said fiercely. On the 97th level, Han Fei summoned 10 black suns, and Su Yuxian's puppet perished immediately. On the 98th level, instant kill. On the 99th level, instant kill. All the way to the 100th level. Interesting. I thought I was the first challenger to pass the 100th level of the Martial Tower. I didn't expect the first place to be taken by you. Looking at Su Yuxian in the empty arena in front of her, Han Fei's eyes were filled with regret, but then she smiled calmly. But the Martial Tower won't leave your footprints. She had defeated the last level. From then on, Han Fei would be the story master from the 1st to the 100th level. However, the time on this level was so slow that it was almost 1/8 of the outside world. Not to mention moving, even thinking about it would take a certain amount of time. The only advantage was that the puppet wouldn't attack before she took the initiative to attack. However, just as she raised her vital energy and was about to strike first, something shocking happened. Congratulations on reaching the final level. Your opponent will be me. Suyu suddenly opened his eyes and slowly drew out a silver sword. However, due to the slow time factor, even Suyu's drawing of the sword felt very blurry to her. All she saw was a flash of silver light in Suyu's palm. Han Fei spoke with difficulty. Didn't they agree that the puppet could only attack passively? Why didn't they play by the rules? As a reward for reaching the final level, I grant you a fair fight. I will take the initiative to attack. Suyu's voice was hollow and emotionless as he drew out the sword and pointed it at Han Fei. Even with Han Fei's cold temperament, she was a little impetuous. Fair? How could it be fair? It was better to end the slow time. If it had been the first few dozen levels, Han Fei might have questioned the rules of the Martial Tower. However, the final level was a level that no one had passed for thousands of years, so it wasn't surprising for any difficulty to appear. The only thing she was curious about was how Suyu had ascended to the 100th level and defeated the previous story master of the 100th level. A puppet that took the initiative to attack, coupled with the fact that time was slowed down 8 times. This was more difficult than ascending to heaven. Chapter 1022. Even though Han Fei had godly skills, it was all empty talk without a chance to use them. With indignation, Han Fei was torn into pieces. Having failed the challenge, she was transported back to the empty first level to wait for the end of the 10 days. Shock and indignation filled her heart at the same time. Han Fei was puzzled. What's going on at the last level? As she lowered her head in thought, the light of wisdom flickered incessantly. At the same time, curses rang out in the Martial Tower. What's going on? How did the story master turn into Su Yuxian? Damn it! What's with the formation that can attack and defend at the first move? Su Yuxian, I'm going to kill you. Initially, most of them were orderly when they attacked Mo Tianxian. But from a certain point on, the story master that everyone challenged became Su Yuxian. What made them want to vomit blood was that as long as they set up an ambush in advance, they could defeat Mo Tianxian in a short time. But once Su Yuxian was activated, the first thing he did was operate the Meteor Lightstream Great Formation. The formation was so powerful that no matter how detailed one's ambush was, one would be crushed in a mud by the formation in an instant. Well, if ambushes didn't work, they would have to fight the story master head-on. However, what made their jaws drop was that Su Yuxian's hiss was 2F*** powerful. The second move was the 9 Dragons Demon Subduing Art. Challengers below the 9th grade Almighty couldn't withstand the 6 demonic dragons and were all eliminated. Even if the 9th grade Almighty could withstand it, Suyu's third move was even worse than Mo Tianxuan's last move. That sword wasn't something that an Almighty could withstand at all. Zhao Li, Qian Feng, and even Bing Wuxin were all eliminated by the sword. As the story master, he eliminated almost everyone as soon as he appeared. Bai Ling Tian was the only one who survived 3 moves. However, on the 90th level, he couldn't achieve an instant kill and was eliminated. This is too unreasonable. Bai Ling Tian was lost in thought. There were 2 unreasonable points. First, why did Suyu become the story master? Second, why was Suyu so powerful? Did the martial tower deliberately enhance Suyu's strength, or is he really that powerful? Bai Ling Tian pondered seriously. In the real world, the black dog stood on its hind legs with its front paws on its hips, laughing heartily. Wahahaha! Eliminate everyone in 3 days, and you won't have to worry about food for the next 300 years. After laughing out loud, he patted Suyu's shoulder. Not bad. As a qualified story master, your performance is too damn outstanding. He was much stronger than the 4 story masters who ran home to eat. From now on, you'll be the Martial Pagoda's dedicated floor master. Screw all of you trial takers to death. Get your doggy paws off me, Suyu said, recalling Han Fei's last battle in his mind. Seeing that Han Fei was unstoppable and was about to break through the 100th story, Suyu had no choice but to intervene personally. With the help of illusions, he easily defeated Han Fei and kicked her out of the Martial Pagoda. Hence, Suyu was the only one who could obtain the crystal ball and the bone at the 100th level. Damn dog, give me everything. Don't miss out on any of the rewards from the 97th to the 100th. Suyu said. The black dog rubbed its hooves. Can I buy on credit? Suyu replied calmly, sure, but you need a witness to pay for the credit. The 20,000 challengers here who were cheated by you will probably be very willing to be witnesses when they wake up. Don't. I'll pay, all right? The black dog bared its teeth and spat out a large number of crystal balls and bones. After counting them, Suyu put them into his pocket and turned to leave. Where are you going? The black dog had a bad feeling. Suyu pointed at himself matter-of-factly. I'm going to challenge again, of course. Since I've passed the level successfully, I certainly have the right to challenge again. You insatiably greedy human. You've robbed me of so many rations. So you want to do it again? Suyu's insanity drove the black dog crazy. Suyu raised 3 fingers. You're wrong. I mean 2 more times. I can pass the level once every 3 days. Now that there are 7 days left, I can still pass the level twice. Challenging others might be difficult, but challenging oneself? Was there any difficulty? I've never seen such a shameless person. The black dog was rolling on the ground in anger. Suyu clearly knew that the challenge was fake, yet he still asked for it. He was obviously asking for its crystal ball and bones. Suyu said indifferently, It's fine if you don't want me to challenge you, but you must let me go up to the 2nd floor and have a look. What was going on with the Martial Tower? Everyone was trapped in the illusion of the 1st floor, thinking that they had reached the other floors, but in fact they hadn't even reached the 2nd floor. Since ancient times, for tens of thousands of years, it has always been like this. No matter how amazing the geniuses were, they had only been to the 1st floor. If that was the case, what was the 2nd floor? Was it a realm that no one had ever reached? No way. The black dog got to its feet. It was rare for it to be serious and resolute. The martial artists of the Jojo continent must never open the 2nd floor before they are prepared, rising to the level of the Jojo continent in one go. So you thought about it. Can you tell me what the Martial Tower is? According to the understanding of the Jojo continent, the Martial Tower was the central area of the martial yard, the place where the challengers cleared the levels and obtained rewards. However, the black dog's words revealed a different message. It's not just the Martial Tower. Does the Jojo continent really understand what the glittering jewel wonderland is? The black dog was suddenly unfathomable. Suyu looked up at the Martial Tower and said thoughtfully, All this time, people have always told me that the glittering jewel wonderland is a legacy left by the outstanding young geniuses of the Jojo continent for the younger generation to obtain opportunities and sublimations. However, after coming to the glittering jewel wonderland, there's a question that no one has been able to ask. That is, was this place really set up by the glittering jewel mortal fairy? Suyu voiced out the question that had been on Pan Heng's mind for a long time. The black dog was silent for a moment. Why do you ask? Suyu said, the eternal mortal fairy, the guardian deity of the Jiuzhou continent. Why is the relic left by a strong mortal fairy who has guarded the Jiuzhou continent for a long time, full of murderous intent? The 5 great disasters, the probability of obtaining sublimations by killing, from the specific dangers to the competitive mechanism. I see the word bloody everywhere. The black dog said, is it difficult to understand? Not every mortal fairy is gentle in killing to become a strong person. Its words came to an abrupt halt. That's the problem. A deity-like being who has guarded the continent for 10,000 years has left behind a cruel and bloody mechanism for its descendants. There must be a reason for the contradiction. Either this place wasn't set up by the glittering jewel mortal fairy, and there's someone else behind the scenes. Or the glittering jewel mortal fairy isn't the guardian deity of the continent at all, but a person who has been beautified by the creatures of the continent. The black dog widened its eyes in surprise and looked Suyu up and down. But this is just your speculation, and there's no proof. Suyu shook his head. Yes, there's no circumstantial evidence, just like there are millions of doubters. He believed that the participants of the past generations had thought about this doubt before. The Wonderland didn't seem like a wonderland. It seemed like a demonic wonderland. The black dog was silent for a long time. But the rewards in the Wonderland are absolutely true. Suyu nodded. Yes, it's precisely because the rewards are absolutely true that it can attract the top geniuses of the past generations to come forward one after another. That's why there's less than 1 in 10 geniuses of Jiuzhou's generation. In my opinion, the purpose of the glittering jewel wonderland isn't to train the geniuses of the Jiuzhou continent, but to harvest them once in 100 years. Wisps of cold light surrounded Suyu's eyes as he stared coldly at the black dog. Last question, who are you? This dog understood the essence of the Martial Tower and the glittering jewel wonderland. It was no ordinary creature. Hee, I'm just a wisp of spiritual intelligence born in 10,000 years. The black dog sneered in a strange manner. Suyu said placidly, why don't you reveal your other identity? The Martial Tower's story master. The black dog was shocked and took 2 steps back. It stared at Suyu vigilantly. How do you know I'm the Martial Tower's story master? It's simple, you said it yourself. The black dog's eyeballs rolled, but it couldn't recall when it said that. You said the other 4 story masters ran home for dinner, but in fact, there are 5 vacant story masters. Aren't you telling me that the last story master is you? Suyu said placidly. I'd really like to know why a story master impersonates the spirit of the Martial Tower, deceives the challengers of the past, and keeps trying to break through to the first level. What's your purpose? This black dog knew too much. Why should I tell you? I don't want to play any more goodbye. The black dog's feet moved like the wind, and it fled immediately. At the same time, it turned around and said, without me, you'll be trapped in the Martial Tower forever. 100 years later, I'll collect your corpses. However, before it could finish speaking, Suyu smiled. You seem to have forgotten the way to break the illusory truth technique. Once the illusory truth technique was broken, 20,000 challengers would join forces to capture it. How could it escape so easily? The black dog was unhurried, and it grinned coldly. Why don't you give it a try? The so-called truth illusion technique was different from the illusion techniques of sight, hearing, smell, and the other 5 senses. It was a kind of cognitive illusion technique. It was the most mysterious illusion technique among all the illusion techniques. Even in the most prosperous ancient times, it was rarely circulated. It was equivalent to a legend. It carried the weight of words, languages, and conversations, subtly changing one's cognition. For example, when a person believed that there was an ancient kingdom in the middle of a barren desert, it was naturally false. But when 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people, and hundreds of millions of people believed it, it would become a belief, a cognition. At this time, the false became true. The rumor of the Martial Tower's 100 stories had been passed down for tens of thousands of years, and it had long become a well-known cognition. Therefore, when the challengers entered the tower, they had no idea that they were in an illusion, in the challenge of 100 stories that didn't exist. This was the illusory truth technique, a cognitive illusion technique. The reason Su Yu could see the flaw in time was that Mo Tianxian didn't mention a word about the Martial Tower. Therefore, the Red Blood Palace's understanding of the Martial Tower's 100 stories was the weakest, and it was the best way to get rid of the illusory truth technique. Now that he thought about it, Mo Tianxian avoided talking about such an important Martial Tower to avoid deepening their understanding of it. Did this mean that this woman had noticed something? Su Yu realized that he might have underestimated this woman who hid herself so deeply. Chapter 10:23. Although the illusory truth technique was mysterious, it was very easy to break it. As long as one person woke up from the illusory truth technique and said that it was an illusion, the illusory truth technique would collapse on its own, and everyone would wake up from the so-called illusion of passing the level. False illusion. The 100-story Martial Tower has been cleared. Wake up now. Su Yu bellowed. However, the 20,000 challengers remained motionless. They had not escaped from the illusory truth technique at all. Haha. Always keep a trick up your sleeve. Knowing that you are a threat to my illusory truth technique, how could I not guard against you? When I chose you to be the story master, I added another illusion technique to your puppet. Anyone who comes face to face with you will be trapped by your illusions. Therefore, it is actually a two-story illusion. The illusory truth technique has been broken, but they still exist in another illusion. And that illusion cannot be broken with words, unless they realize the existence of the illusion themselves. External forces cannot break it. With a maniacal laugh, the black dog strode away. Goodbye, human. Stay with them and die trapped in the first story. However, at that moment, a cold, yet gentle voice was heard. A talking dog, interesting. The black dog stiffened and looked back abruptly, only to be startled. Among the crowd, a young lady in a black dress was moving gracefully. A pitch-black sun was above her head, emitting a mysterious black light. The black dog was scared out of its wits. The woman's ferocity terrified the black dog. It was extremely puzzled as to how this woman had woken up from the two-story illusion. Even if the illusory truth technique was broken, there was still a layer of illusion left. You are an unknown black dog with ulterior motives. Do you think I wouldn't have a backup plan? Su Yu smiled calmly and walked towards the black dog. You cast an illusion on my puppet, but you forgot that Concubine Han has not only seen my puppet, but also my true self. The black dog's pupils shrank slightly. You mean, at the 100th story, when you fought with her with your true self, you sent a message behind my back. That's right. Su Yu nodded and continued to approach. The black dog shook its head. Impossible. Your every move, every look, every word, I have been monitoring them closely. You couldn't have hidden it from me and told her that you were in an illusion. So you looked at the black dog with pity. That's why I said you were just a dead dog. Stupid dog, who said that a message had to be conveyed through eyes, words, and actions. My moves are the message. Han Fei smiled faintly. Yes, thanks to his reminder. From a 96 to the 99th floor, when I fought with him, he had the effect of slowing time by 3 times. However, at the 100th floor, this effect disappeared on its own. I can't help but think about the contradiction. If the Martial Pagoda was controlled according to the program, how could the same puppet have 2 different states? The only explanation is that the Martial Pagoda isn't a program, but someone controlling it. Therefore, when I failed the challenge, I woke up from the 2 layers of illusions on my own and stayed put to see what you were going to do. Hearing this, the black dog was silent for a long time, then suddenly laughed maniacally. Do you really think you've won? Don't forget, you're still inside the Martial Tower. A single thought of mine can seal you all in the first level forever. After he finished speaking, he turned into a black stream of light and headed straight for the entrance of the Martial Tower. So you had a faint smile on his face. I told you, you can't escape. Just as the black dog scurried to the door, 5 colorful writing brushes suddenly appeared as if they had been lying in ambush. They turned into a colorful light screen and shrouded the black dog on the spot. The five elemental heaven extinguishing formation? Han Fei looked at Su Yu with some confusion. A formation with such power wasn't strange at all. What was strange was that this formation originated from the unique skill of the five golden light guards. Until now, she had never heard of them teaching it to anyone else. And the five golden light guards were an enemy force. A glimmer of shrewdness was hidden in her pretty eyes. When did you set up this formation? The black dog couldn't believe that Su Yu had set up a trap at the exit. His every move was clearly under surveillance. No, it was only under surveillance that he could have missed it. Sir, Shunga did a good job, didn't she? Beside Su Yu, a mass of pitch-black ghost energy rose from the ground and condensed into a human figure. It was a very cute little girl with delicate features. The black dog was shocked and said in a low voice, "You actually have a space cavern that can accommodate living creatures?" An ordinary space was not enough to hide a living person. Only a space cavern forged by a mortal fairy could accommodate a living person. However, the space cavern of a mortal fairy was usually established in a fixed space node. A space cavern like Su Yu's that could be carried around was impossible for an ordinary mortal fairy. Only the legendary god-level strong men could forge it. Who sent you here? The black dog had obviously misunderstood that Su Yu was sent by some deity behind the scenes. You don't have to guess blindly. Stay here obediently. Su Yu's eyes were cold as he pressed down with one hand. The five elemental heaven extinguishing formation rumbled and quickly suppressed the black dog. The black dog bared its teeth. Two masses of emerald flames floated out of its pair of emerald eyes and fell on the colorful light screen. With a sizzling sound, a huge gap was burned into the colorful light screen. Su Yu was shocked. A formation that could suppress a stage 1 all creation's old monster was easily broken, just as Su Yu was about to pull out the heavenly orchid silver bamboo sword. A pitch-black sun suddenly appeared in front of the black dog. In an instant, half of the black dog's body was devoured. It was Han Fei. However, all of a sudden, blood splattered everywhere. The lower half of the black dog's body was abruptly torn apart. The black dog escaped from the black hole with only the lower half of its body left. Moreover, as it escaped, its body was constantly regenerating, rapidly recovering to its complete state. The scene was shocking. The so-called body recovery was not unusual for those who had achieved success in their cultivation. It was not surprising even if they could recover in an instant. However, the front half of its body, including the head, was still unharmed. Su Yu couldn't help but think of the Blood Emperor, the indestructible silver body. Even if its body was crushed, it could be restored in an instant. However, the black dog was not feeling well. Its pair of emerald eyes were dim, and its pitch-black dog fur was also gray. It seemed that casting the eerie emerald flames and regenerating on the spot consumed a lot of energy. Su Yu and Han Fei attacked together, but failed to stop it. The black dog slipped out of the martial tower like a wisp of smoke. At the same time, the gate of the martial tower closed with a rumble. Han Fei walked up to the stone gate with a calm look on her face. She tried to operate the black sun and break the stone gate open. However, it was to no avail. The stone gate did not budge. As expected of a martial tower that can withstand the defense of a mortal fairy. Su Yuxian, I'm afraid we're trapped here. Han Fei looked back and said to Su Yu, I'm curious. You obviously had the chance to leave, so why did you stay? One was a starry sky elite, and the other was a nameless challenger. Now, they were both guarding the same place. So you looked to Han Fei. I have my reasons for staying, but Miss Han stayed deliberately. Is there no reason? In response, Han Fei smiled without saying a word. As the most outstanding student of the Supreme Heavenly Demon faction, it would be unbelievable if the faction did not give her 1 or 2 life-saving items in times of crisis. A martial tower could not trap Han Fei. Han Fei walked over and said dispassionately, In your opinion, what is the purpose of this mysterious story master? Firstly, it's not just the story master of the martial tower. Its identity is far more than that. Secondly, its conspiracy is both complicated and simple at the same time. Han Fei said placidly. Oh, tell me about it. Are you testing me, Miss Han? I believe you've already noticed it. We have too little information about its ultimate purpose, so we can't be sure. However, its immediate purpose is not difficult to analyze. It wants to harvest this batch of challengers. Whether it's using the martial disaster to incite us to kill each other or to trap us all in the tower, its goal is the same. It wants to kill us as much as possible. In any case, our deaths are beneficial to it. Our survival is detrimental to it. Han Fei smiled. Therefore, we have the same reason to stay. Her eyes swept across the 20,000 people present. Sitting idly by and watching them die in a martial tower would only benefit the mastermind behind the scenes and harm them. Therefore, our goal is the same for now, Han Fei said softly, not mentioning the crystal ball that could extract fairy artifacts for sure. Even for the supreme heavenly demon faction, fairy artifacts were treasures that could only be obtained by chance. Han Fei would not sit idly by and watch it fall into Su Yu's hands. There would definitely be a fight between them. To crack the plot of the dead dog, we have two things to do. Firstly, get everyone out of here. Secondly, stop them from killing each other. Han Fei said placidly, the first thing isn't difficult, but the second thing is difficult. The competition mechanism since ancient times has led to them killing each other after they wake up to fight for sublimations. If we can't stop them from killing each other by rescuing them from the martial tower, it'll be a waste of effort. It was difficult to convince 20,000 people that they were caught up in a conspiracy and thus give up on killing each other. How could it be easy? After a moment's deliberation, Su Yu said, leave the second thing to me. You? Han Fei was surprised, but after thinking about it, she smiled sweetly. In the unseen world, unexpected actions may be the way to resolve conspiracies. Han Fei suddenly said, there's one more thing that we need to deal with. She pointed at the 20,000 challengers who were still in the illusory realm and could not be awakened by external forces. I'm not proficient in illusory techniques. Miss Han, do you have any ideas? Su Yu asked, his eyes focused on Bing Wuxin. Han Fei frowned slightly and shook her head gently. Although the supreme heavenly demon faction has illusory demonic techniques, they haven't touched upon them. I'm afraid I can't do anything. For a moment, the two seemed to be trapped in a vicious cycle. If they couldn't even wake up from the illusory realm, how could they talk about rescuing them? Since neither you nor I can, whoever started the trouble should end it. Of course, we'll let that dead dog do it himself. Han Fei was gifted and intelligent. Otherwise, she wouldn't have become the #1 genius of the supreme heavenly demon faction. It's definitely not to make a deal with it, let alone beg it, Han Fei said thoughtfully. She couldn't figure out Su Yu's method at the moment, but it could be ruled out as a deal. The black dog had an absolute advantage, so there was no need for it to make a deal with them. Beg it? Humph, don't worry. It won't be able to resist jumping out and dispelling the illusory realm on its own. Su Yu snorted. So confident? Han Fei stared at Su Yu. She, who had always been indifferent, could not help but be curious about Su Yu's mysteriousness. I'll wait and see. Han Fei smiled sweetly. Let's start preparing for the first step. Su Yu said. Han Fei looked at Su Yu indifferently, meaning for him to state the steps. Chapter 1024. It's very simple. Su Yu stared at the 8 sealed entrances. You just have to open the exit. Han Fei was extremely intelligent. She immediately understood Su Yu's intention. I know what to do, Han Fei said calmly. The demonic chi on her body was surging and surging. A pitch-black sun slowly condensed. Unlike the previous black suns, this black sun was even larger in shape. It enveloped Han Fei in the center, as though she was the king of the blazing sun. Even a mortal fairy's strength of the martial arts tower can't break it. But we can build a cross-border tunnel, Han Fei said casually, as if she had never realized how earth-shattering it was to build a trans-realm passageway. The principle of the swallowing power of my demon black sun is that it can run through the 9 regions in the demon world. As long as we pass through the tunnel opened by the demon black sun, we can leave the 9 regions and then return to the 9 regions from the demon world. going back and forth, you can break away from the martial pagoda and directly return outside the martial pagoda. This would explain why Han Fei was reborn from the black hole unscathed when she was cut into pieces by a single sword strike during the trial of the 100th level. The reason was that he had hidden in the tunnel between the two realms. Such a heaven-defying move was truly astonishing. Han Fei glanced at the 20,000 people and said, "I can open the passageway, but the problem is, how are we going to move all 20,000 people out at once? I need to support the black hole, and I can only support it for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. I'm afraid it'll be very difficult to succeed with just you and that brat." The corners of Su Yu's mouth curled up, and he chuckled softly at a certain nothingness. "Have you forgotten that I have a portable cave residence with me? Not to mention 20,000, even 100,000 is nothing." Upon hearing that, Han Fei's eyes lit up. "I see. It doesn't matter even if we bring them back to Jiuzhou when they are trapped in the dreamland. There are many mighty people in Jiuzhou, so it's a piece of cake to dispel a mere illusion." Han Fei no longer had any doubts. "Then let's do it quickly. Don't let the black dog gain the upper hand." Su Yu nodded and flew to Bing Wuxin's side. He then took her into the 9 Jade Spiritual Pearl. Then, the inner sanctum disciples of the Red Blood Palace came in succession. Sure enough, the trick worked wonders. After storing them in the 9 Jade Spiritual Pearl, Su Yu and Han Fei returned to the outside of the Martial Tower. Even if 20,000 challengers were equivalent to losing their experience, it was still better than dying in the glittering jewel wonderland. As Su Yu continued to absorb it, all of a sudden, invisible waves rippled around the Martial Tower. Wasn't I sitting cross-legged and cultivating? Why did you come out? Why are you all here? That's impossible. It hasn't even been 10 days. How can we all exit the Martial Tower?" In an instant, more than 20,000 people woke up one after another, and they were inexplicably shocked. The illusion had been broken. A hint of a smile appeared on Han Fei's indifferent face. Just as Su Yu had said, the black dog had removed the illusion on its own. That black dog finally couldn't stand it anymore in order to annihilate all of us. Su Yu stood beside Han Fei and released Bing Wuxin and the students of the Red Blood Palace. In reality, the 9 Jade Spiritual Pearl was a portable abode, but it was not as vast as the black dog had imagined. It might be able to accommodate 2,000 people, but Su Yu had deliberately underestimated it by saying that it could accommodate 20,000 people. However, in order to kill all the trial takers, it had been fooled in a moment of desperation and released the illusion on its own. However, both Su Yu and Han Fei knew that the bloody feast would begin when the illusion was lifted. The black dog's goal was to lure the 20,000 cultivators to kill each other. Ha ha ha, foolish and insignificant trial takers. Have you finally come out from my illusion? The black dog's voice floated around the Martial Tower, loud and clear. Hearing this, the challengers were all shocked. What? An illusion? Impossible. I've obtained the crystal ball and the bone. It's exactly as the elders of the faction told us. Is this the end of our opportunities? Only a few of the quick-witted and calm ones looked around, and their faces gradually darkened. Ha, bunch of fools. You're about to be trapped to death, and you're still thinking about training? How stupid. The black dog mocked them to its heart's content. At this moment, most of the challengers finally sensed that the situation had changed, and they all came to the doors of the Martial Tower in an attempt to open it. The result was, of course, hopeless. Don't worry, everyone. The Martial Tower will open in 7 days. Don't listen to this black dog's slanderous words. A reputable challenger encouraged the crowd. 7 days? Humph, I control the Martial Tower. The opening and closing times are all up to me. It's more than enough to lock you all up until you die. The black dog sneered contemptuously. At the same time, as if in response to the black dog's voice, the 8 entrances and exits of the Martial Tower opened without warning, and before the crowd could react, they were immediately closed again. This scene finally caused the trial takers to panic. This mysterious person behind the scenes could really control the Martial Tower's opening and closing at will. If they were locked up for 100 years, none of them would survive. If you don't mind, you can borrow my passage between the two worlds. An indifferent voice drifted into everyone's ears. However, Han Fei was still maintaining the heavenly demon black sun. The eyes of those who knew about the heavenly demon black sun lit up at once, and there was hope of survival. Hee. Do you believe this woman from the devil doctrine? As a devil, she does things in a radical manner. Are you sure you'll be teleported to the 9 states after entering, and not the demonic realm? Also, even if she's merciful, the heavenly demon black sun can only last for the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. There are 20,000 of you. How long can you teleport away? Hearing this, the challengers immediately became restless. At this desperate moment, everyone's nerves were stretched to the limit. Although they knew that the black dog was using psychological tricks to confuse them, what it said was exactly what they were most worried about. Hee, if you really want to live, I can give you a chance. As expected, the black dog revealed its fox's tail. A person who decided their fate had given them a clear path. Everyone knew that they would fall for it, but no one was willing to give up on a fluke. As long as you kill a challenger from the foreign realm, I will grant you the right to leave the martial tower. Hearing this, many challengers were shocked. What a vicious method. Out of 20,000 people, only 10,000 could survive. However, this was only the most ideal situation, where one person killed the other. Such a situation was absolutely impossible to achieve, because it had another requirement, and that was, it had to be a challenger from the foreign realm. Within their own faction, if they were willing to coordinate, they could always choose some people to sacrifice themselves. This method was the most harmonious, and there would be no complications. However, killing the challengers from the foreign realm was where the problem lay. For example, if Qian Feng of the Heavenly Knife region killed Bing Wuxin of the Red Blood Palace, would the Red Blood Palace have no reaction? No, it would trigger a decisive battle between the Red Blood Palace and the Heavenly Knife region. By then, the casualties would not be one-on-one. There was a high probability that both sides would suffer, or even perish together. It was the same for the rest of the influences. When the development reached the middle stage, due to the different losses of the influences, there would be a reshuffling of the strong and the weak. When the time came, a chaotic war would break out, and it would no longer be a fight between 2 influences, but between 3, 4, or even more influences. The number of casualties would far exceed half. In the end, out of the 20,000 people, it would be lucky if even 5,000 survived. Our enemy now is you. Don't try to tempt us into killing each other. Many challengers were furious, as if they were being toyed with. The black dog did not hide its anger. Hey, you're just a bunch of ants, so what if I tempt you? Whether you want to live or die, it's up to you. My patience is limited. If you don't make a move in 3 breaths, I'll leave immediately, and all of you will be trapped to death. All of a sudden, the indignant voices became much weaker. The atmosphere at the scene changed from silent to oppressive, from oppressive to vigilant, and from vigilant to murderous. Yes, they knew that the other party was plotting openly, but they had no other choice. Moreover, they had already prepared for this battle. Only by killing more challengers could they obtain a higher chance of sublimation. Now, it was only 7 days in advance. Desperation breeds greed, and greed breeds murderous intent. A feast of slaughter that had been brewing quietly began. The weaker challengers retreated to the edge of the martial tower in groups, as if they were facing a great enemy. Some challengers who had no intention of joining the slaughter turned pale. Some of the more confident, strong men gradually bared their sharp fangs. The slaughter had yet to begin, but they could already smell the scent of fresh blood. There were a total of 20,000 people. It was no longer something that Han Fei and Suyi could hold off. This was a kind of momentum, an unstoppable momentum. In the void, the black dog grinned, revealing its ferocious teeth. I've won. It laughed triumphantly. Suyi said placidly, Is that so? I don't think you've won. The black dog manipulated the hearts of people. Its methods were not brilliant, but it created a general trend that couldn't be changed by relying on the strength of a few people. Words can no longer stop the bloodthirsty hearts. The only way to end everything is to curb violence with violence, Suyu said. Rising into the air, Suyu looked down. His unexpected move caused the whole situation to be affected. The slaughter that was on the verge of breaking out abruptly shook the place. Looking up, Suyu's face appeared before everyone's eyes. If it had been an hour ago, they wouldn't have paid any attention to this silver mask challenger. However, the sudden appearance of the story master, Suyu, had left an indelible impression on them. They waited silently for Suyu to finish speaking. When he finished, the slaughter would begin. I order all of you not to make a move. Suyu uttered a sentence that many people weren't surprised by. However, even the starry sky genius Han Fei couldn't stop them, let alone Suyu, who had just made a name for himself. Those who were looking up at him lowered their gazes, their murderous intent rising. In their hearts, there was only a cold snort. What right do you have to order us? Because I, and the Red Blood Palace, can kill all of you. Leave no one alive. His sonorous words reverberated like thunder, shaking everyone's hearts. They couldn't help but be shaken, because they had almost forgotten something. The Book of the Heart's Oaths. In order to enter the ancient tower, everyone except the supreme heavenly demon faction had signed the Book of the Heart's Oaths. They weren't allowed to attack the Red Blood Palace at any time, but the Red Blood Palace could attack them, and even retaliating would be considered a violation of their oaths. Think about it. If the elites of the Red Blood Palace went on a killing spree in this narrow martial tower, who would be able to escape? As for retaliating, once they did, the Book of the Heart's Oaths would take effect immediately, and the inner demons would strike. Regardless of how it would affect their future training, the inner demons would take effect on the battlefield, and any slight lapse in concentration would lead to eternal damnation. Slivers of coldness welled up in everyone's hearts. Wait, you said that you wouldn't take the initiative to attack us before the martial disaster. Are you going to go back on your word? The #1 expert of one of the regions was extremely excited. He had been prepared to harvest the challengers to increase his chances of success. Chapter 1025. Promise? Do you have my signature and stamp? Suyu sneered. You're the chief disciple of the faction, yet you go back on your word. Aren't you afraid that the Red Blood Palace will be laughed at by the world? Many strong men who couldn't hold back their murderous intent were extremely indignant. Suyu said calmly, I'm sorry. I have to correct you. I'm just an ordinary student from the outside sanctum of the Red Blood Palace. I'm neither favored by the faction leader nor favored by my senior brothers and sisters. I've been living a lonely and poor life, serving as the faction's sweeper all year round. I don't think the faction's reputation will be affected by a sweeper like me. Sweeper? Many of the strong challengers were trembling. Are you trying to deceive us? Idiot! The sweeper is the greatest hidden expert. Suyu was secretly disdainful. At the same time, many pairs of surprised eyes were fixed on the elite students of the Red Blood Palace. Suyu must be joking. Whether it was his previous leader status or his invincible battle prowess after becoming the story master, he should be their chief disciple, shouldn't he? What was up with the sweeper of the outside sanctum? The elites of the Red Blood Palace were flushed with embarrassment. A female student couldn't help but grumble. Junior brother Su, it's true that you're a disciple of the outside sanctum, but to say that you're a sweeper of the Red Blood Palace, living a lonely and poor life, he ran amok in the outside sanctum, seduced peerless beauties like Bing Wuxin, Gongsun Wuxia, and Xu Wulian, beat up the elites of the inner sanctum from time to time, and acted cool and domineering when he was outside, bringing back a few great merits, and becoming famous in the region. This was completely different from the lonely, destitute life that he was talking about as a sweeper. This was the life of a completely different master. Junior Sister Bing, can I cut him down with my sword? A female student asked softly, holding the hilt of her sword. Bing Wuxin shook her head. Of course not. Give me a sword as well. In short, Suyu's earth-shattering identity as a sweeper had shocked everyone. Back to business. I'll kill whoever dares to make the first move. Suyu said, those who don't want to fight, stand on my left, and those who want to fight, stand on my right. Suyu's palms face down, making a choice. Walala, 20,000 people stood on the left, not a single one spared. What a joke! Who would dare to stand on the right side? Regardless of whether it was the weak who had been pardoned or the strong who harbored murderous intentions, all of them succumbed to Su Yu's tyrannical power. Pa pa pa! Applause rang out from the void. It was the sound of a dog clapping its hooves. Wonderful! One eye-opener. Over the past 10,000 years, it's not like there hasn't been a genius like you who tried to stop the slaughter, but it's the first time you've done this, the black dog exclaimed in admiration. From the very beginning, forcing it to take the initiative to undo everyone's illusions, to dispel the killing intent it had carefully planned, he had done it step by step, and it was exceptionally ingenious. In fact, I even suspect that you've already anticipated this Hearts of Scroll. The black dog said, I believe that even without the opportunity created by the supreme heavenly demon sect, you'll find a way to restrict them. Su Yu smiled but did not speak. Indeed, he had thought of such a plan before, but it was inconvenient for him to carry it out. And the supreme heavenly demon sect had given him this opportunity. However, the black dog changed the topic. But do you really think you've won? How can you be so sure that I have solved everyone's illusion? Everyone was shocked. It was impossible. All of the students had shown signs of activity, and none of them were in the illusion. All of a sudden, a horrible shriek rang out. A male challenger's chest had been smashed to pieces without any warning. The attacker was the female student behind him. Her eyes were blank, and she held a bloody bone claw in her hand. She's been controlled by the illusion to kill someone. The crowd around her retreated immediately, shocked and furious. The person she had killed was a student from another region. She killed a challenger from the Tianming region. Kill her. Yes, to prevent her from causing more trouble. The companions of the female challenger drew their swords. Stop. She's only in the illusion, and she didn't mean to hurt anyone. Who dares to hurt her? A life for a life, not to mention being controlled by someone else. Who knows if she'll strike again? Having lost their companion, the people of the Tianming region were furious. Then let's give it a try. Let's see if you dare to come. The other side retorted. The forces of the two regions were at daggers drawn, ready to fight at any moment. Su Yu frowned. Stop it, all of you. When he finished speaking, he threw down the meteor light stream formation from the air, trapping the controlled woman and knocking her out. Glancing at the two sides with cold eyes, Su Yu said, Fools, you're playing right into her hands. Once the war starts, it won't just be you two who will be implicated. Even if only the two sides were fighting, the restless strong men who wanted to fight for the chance of sublimations wouldn't just sit back and do nothing. It was too easy to create a little conflict secretly and get involved in the war. Therefore, they couldn't afford to start a war now. Protect her. If she's unconscious, knock her out immediately, Su Yu said. Even though they weren't convinced by Su Yu, he had become the leader of the crowd. Both sides had to stop fighting. However, right at that moment, two horrible shrieks rang out. The two women were beheaded by the unknown male challenger behind them with two swords. Both of them were killed at the same time. Su Yu's face fell. Without waiting for the situation to develop, he immediately trapped the male challenger and knocked him out, forcing the two sides to calm down. However, before they could be appeased, another tragic situation occurred. Don't kill anyone who's being controlled. Subdue and knock them out. I'll kill anyone who makes a move. Sensing the crisis, Su Yu bellowed. Then, similar sneak attacks appeared one after another. Although they were forcibly suppressed by Su Yu, hatred had arisen among many factions. At the same time, the situation that had been stabilized with great difficulty once again fell into an extremely dangerous situation. Everyone was on guard. Even the seniors and sisters of the same faction couldn't be trusted, because no one knew if the other party was being controlled. If one conflict could be suppressed, then two or three could be suppressed. However, as more conflicts emerged, even if Su Yu had the Book of the Heart's Oaths, he might not be able to intimidate them. Ha! Kid, let me see if you still have the ability to transcend the heavens. The black dog laughed arrogantly. As the laughter continued, screams of agony rang out one after another. At that moment, He maintained absolute calmness. After a moment of silence, he said, "Bring all the people who attacked us just now to me." At his command, the unconscious people were all brought over. He took out a drop of the fountain of life, which emitted a cooling scent, and woke them up one by one. With everyone on guard, they woke up one by one. What happened to me? What happened just now? Did I fall into a coma? The people who woke up were generally the same. They couldn't remember what had just happened. What have you discovered? Han Fei came over. Realizing the gravity of the situation, she couldn't help but ask. Su Yu's eyes flashed as he looked around at the 20,000 challengers. Two things. First, its ability is limited, and it can only activate the illusory technique one by one. Judging from the consecutive incidents that happened just now, no two incidents happened at the same time, but one after another. This means that it can only activate one person at a time to launch a sneak attack. Upon hearing that, Han Fei nodded slowly. I thought of that too. Then, the most important thing is the second point. Su Yu's eyes were solemn. It's probably among us. Han Fei raised her brows. We saw the black dog escape from the Marshall Tower with our own eyes. You're saying it's still in the tower? Do you have any proof? Su Yu nodded. Of course. Although I'm not good at illusory techniques, I still understand the basic principles of illusory techniques. Illusory techniques can only be performed through a medium. For example, the look, the words, the smell. No illusory technique can be performed without a medium. How could the black dog, who's outside the tower, perform it in an impenetrable, enclosed environment like the Marshall Tower? The second piece of evidence is, have you forgotten that it opened and closed the Marshall Tower once just now in order to gain the confidence of the challengers that it could control the opening and closing of the Marshall Tower's door? If I'm not mistaken, it took advantage of that moment to sneak in quietly. Han Fei understood, her pretty eyes sparkling with starlight. Then, what do you think it is? Su Yu glanced around at the challengers and said placidly, It's in one of the 20,000 challengers. It must be proficient in some kind of mysterious, shape-shifting technique. Su Yu had already secretly observed it with his transparent eye, but he found nothing. This shape-shifting technique was quite brilliant. Ha ha ha, kid, you're amazing. You noticed that too. The black dog's surprised exclamation echoed from inside the Marshall Tower. Not bad. I'm back, and I'm right among you. But what can you do to me? There are already 20 conflicts and enmities. I think they're about to erupt. How much longer can you suppress them? The black dog laughed mockingly. In the end, I won. Let everything end. End. The corners of Su Yu's mouth curled into a sarcastic smile. I think this is the beginning of the show. The black dog was taken aback. You still have a trump card? I don't believe you can resolve the conflicts between them a second time. There's only one way to resolve all conflicts, and that's to focus them on one point. Su Yu said with a placid smile. And, as the culprit of all this, aren't you the best medium to focus the conflicts? Once you're dead, they'll have no more hatred to speak of. The black dog sneered. That depends on you being able to find me. I have to say your probing eyes are really impressive, having the ability to see through souls. Unfortunately, this is the glittering jewel wonderland, and I can make use of the conditions here. You won't be able to find me with your eyes alone. You've indeed concealed yourself well, but you've overlooked a very important detail, and that detail is your fatal flaw. So you said placidly. The black dog's eyes narrowed. Are you trying to intimidate me and make me reveal my flaw? If that's the case, you've miscalculated. So you looked up at the sky and said placidly, I don't care about intimidating you. Your flaw has appeared. All of a sudden, a formless wave seeped in from outside the Marshall Tower. Everyone was inspired by it. The black dog was shocked. The glittering jewel wonderland is open for 13 days. Is today the day of the disaster of books? Chapter 1026. However, the black dog was fearless and sneered. What a joke. Didn't you understand the prerequisites for triggering the disaster of books beforehand? So you said calmly, Of course I did. The disaster of books will only befall those who read the book of life. The black dog was startled and suddenly had a bad feeling. It was puzzled. Are you saying that all 20,000 of them have been to the bookyard and read the Book of Life? That's impossible. At least half of them came from other regions and have never been to the bookyard. There was also a burst of confusion in the crowd. Yes, Su Yuxian, I have never been to the bookyard, so it's impossible for me to trigger the disaster of books. Yes, I have never been there either. In this way, most of us can't trigger the disaster of books and can't distinguish the mastermind behind the scenes. However, the corners of Su Yu's mouth curled into a smile that made the black dog's heart tremble. You have indeed not been to the bookyard, but who says that you have not read the Book of Life without going to the bookyard? I have already shown it to each of you. Su Yu leisurely stretched out his palms, one to the left and the other to the right, both palms facing down. This was the movement he made when he separated those who were willing to fight and those who were not. Everyone followed this movement and came to the left side where they were not willing to fight. You put the contents of the Book of Life on your palms. The black dog was inexplicably shocked. Su Yu opened his palms and found a fingernail-sized piece of paper in his palms with 1 or 2 words on it. This paper comes from the Book of Life. According to the rules of the bookyard, as long as you have read it, you will trigger the disaster of books. The rules don't specify how many pages you have read, so my understanding is that even if you only see a word or the paper inside, you will be considered to have read it. When I separated them just now, everyone chose their sides by looking at my palms. Even if you just glanced at my palms, you would see the paper in my palms, which is equivalent to reading the Book of Life, Su Yu explained. Now all of you, accept the arrival of the disaster of books. Only the creatures of the fairy realm. Hearing this, everyone was dumbfounded. They had actually read the Book of Life unknowingly. Even they themselves had not realized it. You prepared for this? The black dog took a deep breath. It had been defeated. It had been utterly defeated. Su Yu replied calmly. Against an old demon like you who can't die in 10,000 years, of course I have to hold back. The black dog said, what if I didn't leave a backup plan? Wouldn't you be letting them be trampled by the disaster of books for no reason? Su Yu shrugged. If they want to trample on them, so be it. Anyway, if I don't tell them, these fools won't be able to figure out where the disaster of books came from. I have nothing to lose. Junior Sister Bing, don't stop me. Hey, Junior Sister Bing, why are you holding your sword? Kill him with 1 strike. Not good. Someone come and stop Junior Sister Bing. Ha ha. Interesting, really interesting. After 10,000 years, there's finally a worthy challenger. The black dog let out a long laugh, not without loneliness. If it weren't for the fact that all of you have to die, I really wouldn't want to kill you. 10,000 years, it's so lonely. I've been guarding a withered grave, and I don't even have someone to talk to. Tisk, you're quite interesting, you damn dog. If you're willing to forsake the darkness and join the light, I don't mind spending an extra piece of meat every day, Su Yu said with a placid smile. The black dog burst into laughter. Don't you want to ask the other challengers about that? They hate me to the core. Aren't you afraid of being deserted? Yes, of course I'm afraid. That's why I have to ferret you out to give the deceased challengers an explanation. Su Yu smiled coldly. It's about time. Formless waves erupted all of a sudden, and the disaster of books had arrived. The 20,000 bewildered challengers were engulfed by the disaster of books amidst their curses. Anyone who triggered the disaster of books would have the illusion of a pitch-black book above their heads, which was a sign of triggering the disaster of books. If there wasn't one, it would undoubtedly be that fairy realm creature. Ah, he doesn't have the disaster of books. Exclamations broke out from the crowd one after another. Su Yu's eyes were like lightning. At the same time, without saying a word, he raised his hand and set up the 5 elemental heaven extinguishing formation to seal off the area. I can't let you get away this time. A cold gleam flashed in Han Fei's eyes. Stepping on 2 pitch-black suns, she flew over rapidly. The disaster of books was about to break out, but there was still some time before it actually happened. This period of time was enough to subdue the black dog. Then, they could deal with the disaster of books with peace of mind. The one who was sealed by the 5 elemental heaven extinguishing formation was an unprepossessing young man in his 20s. He had a slightly tanned face and a medium build. He was the type that would never be recognized if he were still in the crowd. Coupled with the fact that there were more than 20,000 people present, the influences were complicated. To all the challengers, apart from their familiar companions, the others were all unfamiliar faces. Therefore, the black dog hid among them without anyone noticing. "You've won." The young man opened his emerald eyes and flashed an approving smile. Han Fei's face was cold and detached. Without saying a word, she raised her hand, and an incomparably huge great sun descended upon the young man's head. The black sun was enough to transport the young man into the demonic dimension, where he would be torn apart by the people of the demonic dimension. However, the young man's tone changed. "However, this is just the beginning between us. Your name is Su Yuxian, isn't it? Haha, the game between us has just begun. Enjoy it to your heart's content." Su Yu frowned, sensing that something was amiss. Could the black dog have more tricks up its sleeve? "The reason you can subdue me is that there's still some time before the disaster of books breaks out, right? But what if you don't have the time?" The young man smiled mysteriously. Su Yu's heart skipped a beat. "You are," he had a guess in his heart. "That's right. I'm the story master of the Martial Tower, but I'm also the yard master. The yard master of the martial yard." The young man revealed his other shocking identity. Each of the 5 great yards had yard masters that ordinary people couldn't meet. However, the black dog was actually a yard master. As yard masters, everyone has a special ability, and my special ability is the most special. It's similar to that of the flower yard master, but it's superior. The young man smiled calmly. Su Yu's heart skipped a beat. The flower yard master had been placed in the 9 jade spiritual pearl by Su Yu. Her special ability was very simple. It was to control the arrival of the disaster of flowers in advance. The disaster of flowers, which was supposed to come after 7 days, was brought forward by her by a day, resulting in heavy casualties in the Heaven's Craftsman domain. So, as the martial yard master, what was her ability? "My special ability is to control all disasters." The young man smiled with a hint of mockery. "Enjoy it. I'm looking forward to your next performance, if you can survive." Ha 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 ha. Buzz, buzz, buzz. All of a sudden, 3 invisible waves were transmitted rapidly throughout the entire fairyland. Among them, there were waves from the bookyard and waves from the Martial Tower. More importantly, even the waves from the Beast Yard were transmitted. Su Yu sucked in a breath of cold air. This was the special ability of the black dog as the martial yard master, to control all disasters. At the same time, the 3 waves filled everyone's hearts. Moreover, they broke out immediately without any pause. The disaster of books, which would only break out after a while, broke out immediately. All of a sudden, a virtual shadow appeared in front of Su Yu, staring at him coldly. It was the same for the rest of the people. A virtual shadow that only they could see appeared to confront them. Han Fei was no exception. The young man chuckled when his cultivation technique was interrupted and walked away. Before leaving the Martial Tower, he said mockingly, "Enjoy it." Ha ha. Whoosh, the 8 entrances opened at the same time, never to be sealed again. That was because the seal had already lost all meaning to the trial takers who could leave. Instead, it had sealed them in and became a protective umbrella against disaster. Therefore, instead of sealing off the entrances, it was better to open them and let the disasters destroy them. The black dog was reluctant to do so, because there were 20,000 other challengers besides them, but it was forced into a corner by Su Yu and had no choice but to use this method. Huangze. Su Yu stared at the unfamiliar virtual shadow in front of him, his eyes turning. The virtual shadow nodded. "I am the original book of life you read, Huangze." When he first entered the bookyard, Su Yu had unknowingly opened a book of life that Huangze had transformed into. It recorded his life in detail, including the hemorrhoids on his buttocks. "Come on, destroy me, and you will escape the disaster of flowers. If you fail, you will replace me as the new book of life," Huangze said, pulling out a treasured knife. Su Yu rubbed his chin and did not attack immediately. "Can I ask you 2 questions?" Huangze thought for a moment and put away the treasure knife. "Sure. As long as it's something I know when I was alive, I can answer it. But these are the only 2 questions. If you answer them, you must start the battle without further delay. First question, if I get the Book of Life but have not read it yet, what will happen? So you touched the space ring. He had no time to read Mo Jidao's Book of Yang. Fortunately, Huangze knew this when he was alive. After you survive the disaster of flowers, the unread Book of Life will dissipate on its own. Even the copied version is no exception. Second question, for challengers like them who have only read a corner of your Book of Life, how powerful will the virtual shadow of the disaster of books be? Whether I am powerful or not has nothing to do with how much I have read about the disaster of books. Even if I have only read a single word, I will appear with my full strength. Whether I'm strong or not has nothing to do with how much I've read about the book calamity. Even if I've only read a single word, I would have appeared with my full strength. The only difference is that the less I see, the shorter my time of existence will be. Those who have read the entire book will always exist unless they destroy me. But those who have only read a single word, I will not exist for more than a breath's time. Maybe I won't even have the time to launch a move. Is that so? Suyu nodded. If that's the case, let's fight. Huang Ze's gaze sharpened. The treasure knife in his hand turned into a shooting star and headed straight for Suyu. Suyu threw out a few round pearls slowly and enveloped him, binding him so that he could not move. Huangze had been an 8th grade almighty when he was alive. In the eyes of most people, he was extremely talented, but he was no match for Suyu. The meteor light stream formation was enough to suppress him. Huangze sighed. I didn't expect you to be so powerful. I've lost. Destroy me now. I'm sorry. Take a nap first. Suyu slapped his forehead and knocked him out. He then threw him into the 9 jade spiritual pearl. Huangze was dumbfounded. Wait, why didn't you destroy me? I don't want to sleep. I don't like that. Quick, let me out. His beautiful cries reverberated in the 9 jade spiritual pearl for a long time. Suyu clapped his hands, and the rest of the people woke up from the disaster of books one after another. Most of them did not even have a clear look at Huangze's face. Huangze retreated on his own because the time was up. The crisis has been resolved, thanks to junior brother Su. A few young senior sisters blinked their beautiful eyes and surrounded Suyu with smiles. After going through so many things, Suyu's image in the eyes of the inner sanctum elites had been turned upside down, especially when he was fighting with Su Yuxian, who was a story master. His indescribable strength had completely crushed the pride of the inner sanctum elites and won their respect. After that, in the battle against the mysterious mastermind behind the scenes, he had come up with hundreds of clever tricks and ups and downs, which made people worship him. Even Han Fei, who was a Starry Sky elite, had helped him as a support. The main force was on Suyu. Don't you have anything else to do? The disaster of martial arts is upon us. Hurry up and get ready. A clear, cold voice was heard. The senior sisters turned to look and walked away with unnatural looks on their faces. Humph, what's with the arrogance? Isn't it just because you're close to her and got the upper hand? Exactly. I heard that she was the one who unilaterally announced the engagement, and that's how she took possession of junior brother Su. Bah, how despicable. What's there to be afraid of? The engagement hasn't been approved by her elders. Junior brother Su is a tender, ripe old cabbage. We still have a chance to have a bite of him. Why is Bing Wuxin standing in the latrine without taking a shit? We, the inner sanctum elites, are not convinced. Of course, these words were transmitted through vital energy, and they dared not say it out loud. Your disaster of books isn't over yet? Bing Wuxin, relying on her status as Su Yu's fiancée, chased away the ill-intentioned senior sisters. Su Yu pointed at the black book that was still flickering above his head, indicating that the disaster of flowers was still ongoing. He said, "It's almost over. Yes, thanks to you this time, I was able to avert the disaster." Although Bing Wuxin's face was indifferent, there were ripples in her eyes. Who didn't want their man to become more and more outstanding? Su Yu shook his head. It's far from time for us to rest easy. The fluctuations of the disaster of martial arts are getting stronger and stronger. Concentrate on getting ready immediately. Each disaster is stronger than the last, and the danger of the disaster of martial arts is no small matter. Sitting cross-legged with Bing Wuxin, Su Yu rested for a while. Then, he sensed the arrival of the disaster of martial arts. All of a sudden, the world paused for a moment, and then it was as if nothing had happened. The fluctuations of the disaster of martial arts dissipated just like that. What happened? Where's the disaster of martial arts? Bing Wuxin, who was beside him, looked around blankly. She wasn't the only one. All the challengers who were preparing for the disaster of martial arts were shocked and discussing among themselves. According to the rules, when the fluctuations of the disaster disappear, the disaster will officially break out. Why is there no change in the surroundings? Yeah, could there be something special about the disaster? The legendary, extremely powerful disaster of martial arts had disappeared so mysteriously. It was puzzling. According to past records, the disaster of martial arts could destroy close to 40% of the challengers. Could it be that the disaster of martial arts ended before it started because of the previous incident? After some discussion, many challengers came up with a seemingly reasonable conclusion. Only a few of them became more vigilant instead of less. In order to destroy them, the Black Dog didn't hesitate to send out 3 consecutive disasters. How could the disaster of martial arts disappear just like that? They must have overlooked something. So he was lost in thought. All of a sudden, he realized something, and his heart skipped a beat. Chapter 10:27. Bing Wuxin looked at Su Yu strangely. What did you notice? Why you look so pale? Su Yu nodded slightly and got up slowly. Yes, I think I know what the martial disaster is. As soon as he said that, the challengers nearby crowded around him, all wanting to know the meaning of this inexplicable martial disaster. Disaster is a calamity. The disaster of flowers uses flowers as a calamity, petrifying those who get hit. The disaster of books uses books as a calamity, and the losers become the book of life. The martial disaster has actually arrived, and it's right beside us, Su Yu said calmly as he flicked his fingers in his sleeves. Bing Wuxin approached him. I still don't understand. What is the martial disaster? The martial disaster is... Su Yu shook his sleeves abruptly, and his tone turned sharp. The martial disaster is all martial artists. Within a certain range, all martial artists are a calamity. The only way to resolve the martial disaster is to kill all the surrounding martial artists. Several silver pearls flew out from his sleeves and shrouded Bing Wuxin. Bing Wuxin was shocked. You're crazy. Get away from Su Yu Xian. He's killing his fiancée just to resolve the martial disaster. Swish. Some people avoided Su Yu, while others attacked. He's the ultimate hidden danger. Don't be afraid, everyone. Kill him. Someone yelled. The others hesitated for a while, but finally joined in the siege. He's gone crazy, and he's the biggest obstacle to our unity. We can't let him live. I'm grateful for what he did before, but now he's killing anyone for his own benefit. Sigh. Su Yu looked around coldly. The martial disaster is extraordinary indeed, and the imitation is so vivid. If one's mind isn't strong enough, it'll be hard to survive the martial disaster. Long before the fluctuations of the martial disaster were fully activated, I had already fallen into the world created by the martial disaster. I believe that the momentary pause in time is actually a delay in entering 2 different worlds. It's like a stone falling from the air into water. At the moment of contact, due to the buoyancy of the water, the stone will experience a momentary buffer. However, the imitation world is too realistic, and I thought I was still in the outside world with my companions. In fact, I'm alone, and you're all illusions created by the martial disaster. Bing Wuxin was trembling with anger. Nonsense. Hearing him spout nonsense, the tens of thousands of trial takers were infuriated. Damn it, Su Yuxin is crazy. Everyone, there's no need to hold back. Let's attack together and destroy him. Nonsense? Su Yu smiled without saying a word, and his 5 fingers suddenly pressed down. Even though Bing Wuxin had the bloodline of the heavenly sword, Su Yu had struck first to gain the upper hand. She didn't even have time to use her technique before she was annihilated by the meteor light stream great formation and turned into dust. The shattered Bing Wuxin did not leave behind any blood, only a cloud of gray smoke. Disperse. With a wave of Su Yu's hand, the 8 round pearls dispersed and shot in all directions. All of a sudden, the 8 challengers who were besieging him were killed. However, after they died, all of them turned into gray smoke. Even some of the wounded had gray smoke flowing out of their wounds instead of human blood. What was even stranger was that the martial pagoda, which had been filled with battle cries that shook the heavens, instantly became deathly silent. All of the challengers stopped in their tracks and stared at Su Yu. Their eyes gradually turned into a cloud of drifting smoke like will-o'-the-wisps. It was extremely eerie. Su Yu was right. This wasn't the martial pagoda at all, but the world created by the martial disaster. You've got guts. An erratic voice reverberated in the air. I am the will of the martial disaster. Can you tell me how you're so sure that you're trapped in the martial disaster, and why you're so decisive and ruthless, even killing your fiancée without hesitation? Su Yu stood upright. It's simple, because one person is missing from the 20,000 challengers. Han Fei. If this was the real world, it would be hard to understand why she would suddenly disappear. Her absence proves that I'm in a fake world. After a long silence, the will of the martial disaster sighed softly. I see. As for why Han Fei didn't exist in the fake world, the will of the martial disaster didn't say. However, so you already had some guesses. What happens if the challengers never realize that they're in the fake world of the martial disaster? Su Yu asked. The smoky Han Fei said they'll be trapped in the world of the martial disaster until their physical bodies decay and die in the outside world. Upon hearing that, Su Yu finally understood that the martial disaster could destroy more than half of the people. This was the reason. It wasn't that the martial disaster was powerful, but that it was too illusory. Most people were in the martial disaster but didn't realize it, thinking that they were still in the outside world. The deeper they were trapped in the world of the martial disaster, the harder it was for them to think, and they would eventually sink into oblivion. Yes, I understand now. Su Yu nodded and looked around at everyone coldly. To get rid of the world of the martial disaster, the only way is to destroy everyone in this world. All martial artists are disasters. The will of the martial disaster nodded indifferently. That's true. However, you can only save yourself, but not others. You can't escape the fate that the martial Yarmaster has arranged for you. Upon hearing that, Su Yu sneered. That dead dog, even it can't do anything to me, let alone a martial disaster left behind. It'll be a piece of cake for me to save them. Upon hearing that, the will of the martial disaster fell silent for a long time, as if it was silently mocking Su Yu. Don't pretend to be profound. The martial disaster is indeed unimaginable, but its fatal loophole shouldn't be underestimated. Su Yu sneered. If I'm not mistaken, the reason why Han Fei's world isn't in this fake world is because she left the fake world through the Black Sun the moment she was trapped in the world of the martial disaster. She's in the real world, so of course she wouldn't exist in the fake world. I can also use her as a reference. As long as I leave the fake world, everyone else's fake worlds and my existence will suddenly disappear into thin air. By then, anyone with the slightest bit of intelligence will begin to question the authenticity of the world they're in. Once they do, they won't be far from realizing that the world they're in is fake. Don't forget, they're the top elites of the Jiuzhou continent, and there's no shortage of smart people like them. The will of the martial disaster fell silent again. After a long while, it sighed softly. The younger generation will surpass the older. Each generation will surpass the previous one. However, you've obviously overlooked one thing. Realizing that you're in the fake world is only a precondition. To leave, you'll have to destroy all the illusions here. The abilities of the illusions are comparable to the real body. Are you sure you could defeat everyone else? Can the rest of the people who realize it also defeat everyone else? Su Yu replied placidly. Of course, I have no problem with that. As for the rest of the people, they won't have any problem either. If I leave, the next person who realizes the fake world will have one less formidable opponent like me in his fake world. and the next person will have two less formidable opponents. So on and so forth. The strong ones will leave first, and in the end, there will only be a few weaklings left. Wouldn't it be easy for them to leave? Upon hearing that, the will of the martial disaster was disappointed. You've discovered it after all. I don't know if it's a blessing or a misfortune that an anomaly like you has appeared in this martial disaster. It should be a blessing. Someone should have appeared to stop that thing from happening. When it finished, the will of the martial disaster dispersed as if it had never appeared. Stop that thing? Suyu couldn't help but frown as he sighed inexplicably. The waters of the glittering jewel wonderland are extraordinarily deep, but that's what makes it interesting. Suyu's interest was piqued. What exactly was the legacy of the mortal fairy that had been praised by the people of the Jojo continent for 10,000 years? Was there anything in the world more exciting than uncovering this secret? Glancing at the illusions of the 20,000 challengers present, Suyu's eyes shone with excitement. Although the will of the martial disaster didn't state it explicitly, he had sensed some hidden rules when he killed Bing Wuxin's illusions. Although the illusions were powerful, they wouldn't initiate an attack. Otherwise, they would have attacked when Suyu had just entered the world of nothingness and was unguarded against them. As expected, Suyu sat with his legs crossed. The 20,000 illusions didn't budge an inch. They only fixed their gray eyes on Suyu, showing no intention of swarming him. Dongfang Tianfeng by Ling Tian, Bing Wuxin, the strongest of each region. Suyu glanced at them one by one. Those who could truly threaten him were the few top-notch strong men. As for the rest, they were no match for Suyu in a one-on-one fight. Suyu had some confidence in Bing Wuxin. Even if she activated the heavenly sword bloodline, Suyu had a way to deal with her. Dongfang Tianfeng and Bai Ling Tian had too little information, so he couldn't predict the depth of their capabilities. There's only one chance to leave the world of the martial disaster. Being prepared is the best strategy. Suyu retrieved the floating life door and started training on the spot with the help of the demonic energy within. Using a few life-saving artifacts to destroy Dongfang Tianfeng and Bai Ling Tian, he might have a chance of winning. However, it would be a waste to use it on them. It was something worth using only in a life-threatening situation. Holding the floating life door in his left hand, Suyu retrieved 3 drops of orange liquid with his right hand. They were fragrant, and a light whiff of the fragrance made him feel refreshed and relaxed. The honey of 100 flowers can increase one's perception tenfold. Haha, I can't help but look forward to it. Suyu swallowed a drop, and a mysterious energy melted into his soul. All of a sudden, Suyu felt like he was walking on cloud 9. He was more than 10 times more sensitive to the profound mysteries of the world. His perception had been gradually improved to a human's level under the nourishment of the red liquid drops of the divine nine-dragon cauldron. Now that it had been enhanced tenfold, it had soared to an inhuman state. This feeling was not much different from that of Xia Jingyu, the mysterious divine lady. Suyu was indescribably excited by this unprecedented feeling of ease. I finally understand why Dongfang Tianfeng wanted the flower Yar Master. With my above-average perception, I can surpass all top-notch people perception and reach the level of the Divine Lady by swallowing a drop. How could a starry sky genius like her reach a higher level? There's no obstacle in the world that can stop her. With the help of the honey of 100 flowers, Suyu's thoughts were clear, and he was able to consider all the causes and effects of the world. As a result, Suyu had a new understanding when he pondered about the glittering jewel wonderland. Could this be the glittering jewel wonderland? The clues he had were limited, but Suyu now had a superhuman brain, and he could analyze 2 possibilities. The more that's the case, the more interesting the glittering jewel wonderland is. Suyu speculated about the nature of several kinds of wonderlands, and his interest grew. Chapter 1028. 1. A broken blue stone slab was floating in front of Suyu's chest. It was the stone slab that contained the heaven's sun gazing at air technique. Previously, he had meditated for a long time without any progress. Now, with the help of an unprecedented state of thinking, how could he miss it? Not only that, but Suyu also took out the solar divine palm technique. The 9 dragons devil subduing art, the heaven sun gazing at air technique, and the divine sun palm. Suyu planned to cultivate 3 cultivation techniques at the same time. It was not that Suyu was eager for quick success, but this was a rare opportunity that he could not miss. Suyu got rid of the distracting thoughts in his mind and operated the power of time. The space-time around him accelerated by 500 times as he entered a meditative state. First, it was the 9 dragons devil subduing art. The difficulty of this art was not in comprehending it, but in containing and instilling the demonic chi. Now that he had enough demonic chi, cultivating it would be a piece of cake. After that was the sun god palm. The main point of this palm technique was to comprehend it. Previously, it was extremely difficult to cultivate it, and many parts of it were extremely obscure. However, now that he was comprehending it, it was a piece of cake. Finally, there was the heaven sun gazing at air art. The 3rd level, the illusionary soul realm, was equivalent to a celestial level cultivation technique. The difficulty of comprehending it was far above that of the sun god palm. However, Yun Yazi had passed on this level of comprehension to Suyu as a reference. Now, with 10 times the power of perception, the difficulty was greatly reduced. Before long, Suyu's body was covered with many strange phenomena. First, there were indistinct demonic dragons flickering around his body. Following that, a hazy object seemed to be faintly discernible at the top of his skull. Finally, a dazzling white light flickered incessantly in Suyu's palms. 3 different colors of light were constantly flickering around Suyu, alternating with one another. 2 hours passed, 4 hours passed, 6 hours passed. Suddenly, the 3 types of light shone brightly. All of a sudden, a giant black circle that was 1,000 feet wide appeared on the ground beneath Suyu's feet. Demonic chi surged within the circle, and with a deafening roar of thunder that pierced through the clouds, a giant demonic dragon that was hundreds of feet thick flew out from the demonic world and descended into the space. Compared to Suyu's previous demonic dragon, this demonic dragon was unbelievably huge. It was at least 8 times as thick as the previous one. What was even more shocking was that the demonic dragon's head actually had 8 heads. 8-headed demon dragon. This was the 8th stage of the 9 dragons devil subduing art. The person who created this technique was a devil Buddha who entered Buddhism from the demonic path. He used the demonic path to enter Taoism and left behind this divine technique. The conditions to cultivate this technique were harsh. Only those with dragon blood could condense the demonic dragon. Suyu possessed the real dragon spirit veins, which was why he had the opportunity to cultivate. However, according to the cultivation technique recorded by the demonic monk, one could defeat a late-stage divine master by condensing 8 demonic dragons. However, at this moment, Suyu could not help but be stunned when he felt the enormous pressure of the 1,000 feet long demonic dragon. The feeling that this demonic dragon gave him was no less than a stage 1 all creation's old monster. In fact, he was even faintly surpassing them. Moreover, there was no record of the strange phenomenon of the 8-headed demonic dragon appearing when one cultivated it to the 8th layer. Could it be that there's something wrong with my training method or my constitution? Suyu murmured in confusion. Right at this moment, a strand of hair fell from the top of his head, landing on the ground and transforming into a person. It was Yun Yazi. It has indeed deviated from the original path of the technique, but it has nothing to do with the cultivation method and physique, Yun Yazi said with a smile. When did Master wake up? Suyu asked in surprise. Yun Yazi had been in isolation to forge the void-traversing flying wooden bird for Suyu, so he wouldn't be able to show up for 3 days. It's been a few days. The flying wooden bird has been forged and placed in your storage ring. Suyu had no time to wonder when Yun Yazi had hidden the wooden bird from him and placed it in his storage ring. He was more curious about something else. Master, have you seen everything that has happened these past few days? Yun Yazi nodded. I've seen it, and I've also taken a stroll around the glittering jewel wonderland. As he spoke, Yun Yazi's eyes darkened, revealing a complicated look. As expected, things have happened after all. Suyu was confused, but he knew Yun Yazi very well. If he wanted to tell him, he wouldn't keep him in suspense. Besides, Suyu hoped that he could uncover the truth on his own. Let's not talk about this. Master, do you think there will be any adverse effects from the deviation of my cultivation technique? Yun Yazi suppressed his thoughts and shook his head. How could there be any adverse effects when you improve the power of a cultivation technique to a higher level? If there must be an adverse effect, it would probably be when you condense the last demonic dragon. Suyu's heart skipped a beat. He vaguely remembered that the demonic monk who had created this cultivation technique had attracted a heavenly tribulation when he cultivated to the 9th dragon. He had been blasted into ashes on the spot, which had benefited Suyu. If Suyu had improved the cultivation technique to a more powerful state, wouldn't he have attracted a heavenly tribulation when he condensed the 9th dragon? The mutation of your cultivation technique must have something to do with the training materials. Yun Yazi pointed at the jade box of the floating life door in Suyu's arms. This is the true demonic energy of the demon race. In the Jiuzhou continent, it should be called the real demonic energy. It is purer than any known demonic energy on the continent. It's not surprising that it possesses such power. Looking at Suyu, Yun Yazi said, besides, the original power of this cultivation technique should be far more than this. It's limited by your physique, which limits it greatly. If that evil god can really improve your first dragon's body into the 9 dragon's body, the true power of this cultivation technique will be fully unleashed. Hearing that, Suyu was amazed. Yun Yazi seemed to be particularly concerned about this demonic technique. Was this really an ordinary demonic technique? If this cultivation technique is put to good use, one day you will reap great rewards, Yun Yazi said meaningfully. Now, let me see your progress in the heaven sun gazing at air technique. Yun Yazi lifted a finger and pointed between Suyu's brows. All of a sudden, Suyu's soul left his body. Surprisingly, when his soul left his body, Suyu did not feel the coldness of the past at all. Instead, it felt almost the same as his physical body. What was even more peculiar was that there was an additional cloak on his soul. The cloak of royalty has appeared for the first time. Not bad. It's a sign of training to the illusionary soul realm. Yun Yazi's eyes shone with excitement. The effect of the honey of 100 flowers is really amazing. The cloak of royalty? Suyu fiddled with the cloak on his soul curiously. The cloak of royalty is an additional reward given when the heaven sun gazing at air technique reaches the illusionary soul realm. Its effect is defense. This is the cultivation technique's recognition of your training qualifications. Could a cultivation technique choose its owner? This was the first time Suyu had heard of it. However, he was more concerned about something else. The cloak can only be used as a soul defense, right? How high is the specific defense? Of course, it will be high enough for you to be satisfied. In order to prevent the cultivator of this technique from being deprived of his physical body and forcibly occupying it, the cloak of royalty will protect you from all soul attacks below the mortal fairy level. Upon hearing that, Suyu took a breath of cool air. All soul attacks below the mortal fairy level? Wouldn't the soul attack of a stage 6 all creation's old monster be helpless? If his physical body was shattered, his soul would be safe and sound. Looking at the whole world, apart from the 9 great prefectures' kings, the severed fairy cliff master, and the unknown mysterious mortal fairy, no one could really kill Suyu. At this moment, Suyu finally realized the benefits of the heaven's sun gazing at air technique. Try the effect of the lower class illusionary soul realm again, Yun Yazi said. Suyu nodded. The cloak of royalty was an additional defense, but Suyu had not tried the effect of the illusionary soul realm. According to the records on the green stone slab, the illusionary soul realm was divided into 3 levels: lower class, upper class, and top class. The 3 levels would stimulate different powers. Now that he had cultivated the lower class, Suyu was looking forward to seeing how powerful it would be. As his soul returned to his body, Suyu's heart stirred, and he summoned Shangge. After thinking for a moment, Suyu's eyes flashed. Shungu, who was facing this pair of eyes, suddenly changed her expression and retreated quickly. She looked surprised and doubtful. Gu Taishu. In Shang Ji's eyes, Suyu had transformed into a handsome and tall young man. She knew this person. He was her master's sworn enemy. Surprised and doubtful, Shungu tried to probe him, but at a glance, she couldn't tell whether he was real or not. What a realistic illusion. Suyu nodded with satisfaction. After thinking for a moment, his eyes flashed again. The world in Shang Ji's eyes changed abruptly. She had actually returned to the demonic abyss of the 9 underworlds of the Zhenlong continent. The sense of realism made her unable to detect the existence of the illusion at all. The dim light in her eyes dissipated, and the illusion around Shungu also dissipated. Master, what level of enemy can this illusion deceive? Suyu asked, after trying it out. As long as they looked at each other, he could instantly activate the illusion to change himself or the enemy's surroundings. Yun Yazi said, "Your current soul realm is 6th grade Almighty. So, in theory, the souls of Stage 3 all creations old monsters can't get rid of your illusion. However, this is only in theory. Usually, when one has cultivated to the level of all creations old monsters, he has countless treasures on him. Treasures with illusion defense are very common. In practice, very few Stage 3 all creations old monsters will fall for it." So that was the case. However, Suyu was very satisfied. In the Martial Tower, he had seen the magical effects of the illusion, so he was looking forward to it. Stepping into the illusionary soul realm, the power of Suyu's Heaven Sun gazing at air had increased tremendously. Finally, it was the 2nd volume of the Heaven Extinguishing Divine Palm, the Sun Palm. This palm technique had improved greatly as well. It had directly entered the top class. In terms of power, it was slightly inferior to the 8th stage of the 9 Dragons Devil Subduing Art. Master, does Suyu have any advice on the Heaven Extinguishing Divine Palm technique? Suyu had been very puzzled. This technique was known as a fairy-level technique, but its power was far from comparable. Yun Yazi took the secret scroll, flipped through it, and tossed it back to Suyu. A simplified fairy-level technique with its essence lost. It's tasteless and a pity to discard. It's not even as good as a complete top-grade legendary technique. As a transitional technique, you've reached the end of your mission. You don't have to waste any more time on it. Streamlined? Suyu was stunned. The technique that had been cultivated for so long was actually a castrated one. It made sense. This technique was cultivated by the guards under the command of the Central Prefecture's king. There were many practitioners, so it was inevitable that it would be leaked. Cutting out the essence was a good protective measure to prevent it from being leaked. However, Suyu felt it was a pity to just throw it away. It was a simplified version of his fairy-level technique, after all. Moreover, it was quite famous. If he used it to fool people, he could still get a lot of benefits. Putting away the technique, Suyu exhaled a mouthful of murky air. He stood up and looked at the 20,000 virtual shadows of the challengers with a smile. If he had faced the virtual shadows of Dongfang Tianfeng and Bai Ling Tian just now, he would definitely win now. Although the will of the martial disaster emphasized that the virtual shadows had the same capabilities as the real body. However, the capabilities of the virtual shadows should be limited to their cultivation and various magical treasures and talismans. It was impossible for them to replicate their reactions and experience in battle. In that case, his chances of winning would be greatly increased. Looking at the crowd of virtual shadows, Suyu was not worried. Instead, he was delighted. Chapter 1029. Poof! Half a day later, with a dull thud, a bloody hole appeared on Dongfang Tianfeng's forehead. With a strange, confused look in her eyes, she turned into a puff of smoke and dissipated. Only Suyu and an adorable little girl were left in the huge martial tower. "Sir, your strength is unparalleled, overwhelming the world. 20,000 challengers couldn't stop you alone." Shunga looked delighted. "When did you learn to flatter?" Suyu clapped his hands and picked up the silver pearls scattered on the ground. as well as the heavenly orchid silver bamboo sword. Dongfang Tianfeng was the last one. After killing her, all the challengers were destroyed. The process wasn't as easy as Shunga had described. Although the virtual shadows combat experience and reaction time were almost zero, some of them still posed a challenge to Su Yu. For example, Bing Wuxin's undying sword body was extraordinary, and Su Yu had to deal with her with all his might. Next was by Ling Tian. This person was rather odd. When they fought, his techniques and treasures were sloppy and ordinary, and there was nothing special about him. However, he had learned a lot of things, and he was proficient in at least 100 martial techniques. When fighting him, Su Yu felt like he was being targeted, and the time spent fighting him was extremely long. I wonder where Bai Ling Tian got his martial techniques from. Su Yu couldn't help but be surprised. He thought that with the power of time, it would be far easier for him to cultivate martial techniques than others. However, the fact that he had more than 100 techniques with him, and all of them were legendary techniques, was astounding. Su Yu only knew one person who had 100 techniques, and that was Xia Jingyu. However, Xia Jingyu was from the mysterious Divine Lady tribe, and her innate comprehension was superior to that of humans. What was going on with Bai Ling Tian? This Bai Ling Tian is very mysterious. Besides, judging from the fight between the virtual shadows, he obviously has a trump card that he hasn't shown yet. After a round of fighting, Su Yu put Bai Ling Tian on the list of people he had to be wary of. Finally, there was Dongfang Tianfeng, a rather mysterious woman. At first, Su Yu didn't know what the name Dongfang Tianfeng meant. However, after interacting with the challengers from the foreign regions, how could he not know where the Dongfang family name came from? The Great Oriental Family, the world's only family. The most ancient family of the continent, a mysterious family with a longer history than the current continent. No one knew how long the Great Oriental Family had existed or how many years they had experienced. The only thing he knew was that the Great Oriental Family had mortal fairies and supreme venerables in the past generations, and there were even 2 supreme venerables in the current generation, which had shaken the entire continent. The eastern continent had completely fallen into the hands of the Dongfang family. How could Su Yu not know such a colossal being? When fighting Dongfang Tianfeng, Su Yu was fully prepared. But the result was unexpected. With the help of illusions, Shang Ji's sneak attack, and the heavenly orchid silver bamboo sword, he easily won. Compared to what he had imagined, Dongfang Tianfeng was much weaker. In fact, she was far weaker than Bing Wuxin. This woman is unusually low-key, Su Yu mused. From the way the virtual shadow imitated, only theurgy and treasures that had been used before would be imitated by the world of the martial disaster. With the trials of the 100-story martial pagoda, it was believed that the vast majority of martial artists would bring out their trump cards. Dongfang Tianfeng was the only one who did not display many powerful techniques, so the virtual image she imitated was exceptionally weak. The girl next door? You're quite a schemer. Su Yu chuckled. Looking around, Su Yu said placidly, all the virtual shadows have been destroyed, and the martial disaster is over. It's time to leave the illusory world. There's an even more troublesome disaster of beasts waiting outside. The outside world. All the challengers maintained their last posture before the arrival of the martial disaster, motionless. Some held their swords, some whispered into each other's ears, some smiled confidently, and some were drenched in nervous sweat. It was as if time had frozen on the entire scene. Only one person stood out from the rest. Glancing back at the challengers behind her, Han Fei's expression flickered with determination. In front of her, 8 pitch-black blazing suns sealed off the 8 doors. Outside the doors, strange and horrifying roars could be heard, and the demonic energy was shocking. Among them, there was no lack of the aura of all creation's demonic beasts. Intuitively, Han Fei could even sense an unusually dangerous demonic energy hidden among the demonic beasts. That demonic energy had secretly locked onto her. This was the disaster of beasts. Half a day after the martial disaster arrived, the disaster of beasts arrived just as scheduled, with a gap of only 2 hours. The beast yard opened wide, and the demonic beasts that have been living and breeding there since ancient times swept across the fairyland. A large group of demonic beasts sensed the challengers in the martial pagoda and headed straight for the place, like a great army bearing down on the border. Led by two-stage, one all-creation's demonic beasts, 1,000 almighty and 100,000 fairy demonic beasts. Such a large group of demonic beasts attacked in the form of a tidal wave. The magnificent scene was comparable to the Black Beast Tide that occurred once every century on the continent. This beast tide could not be stopped by any human. Han Fei sensed the arrival of the martial disaster. After resolving it easily with the heavenly demonic black sun, she faced the massive beast tide head-on. Fortunately, the indestructible martial pagoda acted as a defense, and Han Fei guarded the 8 entrances. She could hold off the beast tide by herself. However, it was only a stopgap measure. The beast tide did not know fatigue. Again and again, it organized huge groups of beasts to attack. Even though the beasts that charged into the black sun were like clay oxen entering the sea, disappearing without a trace. However, sustaining the heavenly demonic black sun consumed a lot of energy. Han Fei had held on for 12 hours, and she was nearing her limit. Looking back, she saw that no one had woken up. She could not help but sigh indifferently. "I've done my best. Take care of yourselves." It was not that Han Fei was benevolent and willing to sacrifice herself to fight the unstoppable beast tide for them. In fact, as a member of the demonic path faction, under the influence of the demonic energy all year round, most of them were selfish and indifferent. Han Fei was no exception. The main reason she could do this was that she was wary of the unsettling black dog. Subconsciously, she did not want it to succeed. That was why she had protected the 20,000 challengers, leaving not even their bones behind. However, the challengers behind her had not woken up yet. She had no choice but to give up and leave this place to protect herself. Just as she was about to leave, she looked back suddenly, and surprise filled her eyes. She had anticipated who would wake up first, but it was a little different from what she had expected. "The first one to wake up isn't Dongfeng Tianfeng," Han Fei said bluntly, staring at the smiling Suyu. "Oh, did I disappoint you, Miss Han?" "Not really." Han Fei put down the cultivation technique in her hand and looked at him indifferently. "If you have no other way to stop the beast tide, I'll take my leave." Suyu glanced at the few black suns and was secretly shocked. Fortunately, this woman had held off the beast tide for them for a while. Otherwise, after being trapped for half a day, all of them would have been obliterated into nothingness. "Miss Han, don't you care about the students of your faction?" Suyu pointed at a group of students of the supreme heavenly demon faction. Han Fei was expressionless. "The conditions don't allow me to take so many students with me." "Oh, remember that you have a portable cavern. If you're willing to help me bring them along, the supreme heavenly demon faction will thank you." This woman had a rather cold temperament, showing no attachment to her fellow faction members. Shaking his head slightly, Suyu said, "A mere beast tide isn't difficult to resist. What's difficult is, why do you think a beast tide is equal to a beast disaster?" Suyu's eyes shone with shrewd light. His gaze pierced through the beast tide and cast towards the faraway depths. Han Fei was shocked. A beast tide that only happens once in 100 years on the continent isn't a great disaster? If it were in the northernmost region, a beast tide of this scale would require at least 10 all creation's old monsters to resist. To resolve it, the faction leader would need to use the mortal fairy's strength. Suyu shook his head. "I'll repeat myself. A beast tide isn't equal to a beast disaster. If you really think you can overcome the beast disaster by resisting this beast tide, you'll end up miserable." Han Fei pondered. "Why do you say that?" "Miss Han, haven't you noticed the commonality of the so-called disasters?" Suyu squinted as he stared at the herd of beasts. Han Fei's intelligence was unparalleled, after all, and she understood immediately. Her beautiful brows creased slightly. "Are you saying that the disasters will trap us in the fairyland?" "That's right. The disaster of flowers turned those who failed into stone statues. The disaster of books turned those who failed into books of life. and the disaster of martial arts turned those who failed into virtual shadows. All in all, the commonality of all disasters is that they materialize those who failed. Han Fei's eyes shone brightly. But the beast tide simply kills us, not materializes us. That's right. That's the nature of the so-called disasters, Su Yu said with a nod. So, the real disaster isn't a beast tide. So the specific disasters are still unknown. Su Yu nodded. Su Yu's expression turned grave. Yes, it's precisely because it's unknown that it's scary. The other disasters were simple and straightforward, but the beast tide was the only one that people couldn't guard against. Ah, Sister Fei or Mr. Su, what are you talking about? I want to hear it too. All of a sudden, Dongfang Tianfeng's voice rang out from behind them. Her innocent face, which looked both angry and happy, approached them curiously. So fast, Su Yu stared at her meaningfully. You're quite fast, Han Fei said indifferently as she sized her up. Dongfang Tianfeng chuckled. How can I be faster than Sister Fei and Mr. Su? When I came to my senses, Sister Fei wasn't in the illusionary realm of the martial arts disaster at all. As for Mr. Su, TSK, I didn't expect you to be so powerful. If you hadn't left the illusionary realm first, causing your virtual shadow to disappear right away, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to get out of it for the rest of my life. You're too powerful. I believe the other experts from the other regions are also stumped by you. Her words came from the bottom of her heart. In fact, she and Su Yu had realized the solution to the martial arts disaster almost at the same time. However, she had fought until the very end and was stuck at Su Yu's hurdle, unable to destroy his virtual shadow. It was only when Su Yu left that she managed to break free. Swoosh! At that moment, another person woke up. It was by Ling Tian. Bing Wuxin, who was not far behind, was followed by several top experts from the other regions. As more and more people left the illusionary realm, those who were still trapped in it, no matter how stupid they were, should have realized that they weren't in the real world but the illusionary realm. After most of the experts emerged, their gazes at Su Yu changed. Judging from the way many of them fought with the virtual shadow, if the top expert of the region was considered a difficult level of difficulty, then Bing Wuxin's was a hero level of difficulty, and Bai Ling Tian's was a king level of difficulty. They were extremely difficult to deal with. However, only those who had fought with Su Yu's virtual shadow understood. Su Yu's was a F*** hell level of difficulty. He started with the Meteor Light Stream Great Formation, used the Nine Dragons Demon Subduing Art, and with a backhand strike of sword energy that could destroy everything, he had beaten them to a pulp. Even by Ling Tian and Bing Wuxin, who were familiar with Su Yu, felt troubled. The scene was so familiar with the 100-story challenge of the Marshall Tower that they almost broke out in curses. Fortunately, Su Yu exited the illusionary realm very quickly. Only then did they heave a sigh of relief. There were no more obstacles, and they left the illusionary realm one after another. Looking at the challengers who had woken up in a spurt, then glancing at their complicated gazes at Su Yu, Han Fei couldn't help but be surprised. How many people did this guy block alone? However, with so many experts awakening at the same time, the pressure on Han Fei lessened abruptly. Since we've woken up first, we mustn't allow that damn dog's treacherous scheme to succeed. Su Yu stood at the entrance and turned to face the crowd. Han Fei nodded her snow-white chin lightly in agreement. Yes, that dog is too cunning. We must work together. The two women took the lead to chime in, making the situation very delicate. Su Yu seemed to have become the leader of the crowd. There were many who were unconvinced. TSK, does a character from the barbarian region really think of himself as a leader? Be it Han Fei or Dongfang Tianfeng, neither of them are willing to be inferior to others. Now, they're vaguely taking him as their leader. Hee, what a brilliant strategy. It's hard not to admire him. Yeah, who does he think he is? At most, he's just a strategist who's better than the Starry Sky elites. Does he really think he's so important? Actually, I think his strength is passable, but not particularly impressive. Many challengers haven't shown their full strength, which is why Su Yuxian was so powerful in the 100-story challenge and the virtual shadow in the martial disaster. If we reveal all our trump cards, what can he do? Everyone present was a renowned genius. So how could they be willing to be inferior to someone else? Especially this person, who had used the Heart's Oath scroll to restrain them and disrupt their plan to harvest the weak and improve their chances of sublimation. They didn't deliberately suppress their discussions. Suyu heard them very clearly. Suyu dismissed the rumors with a smile and said seriously, "The disaster of beasts is right before our eyes. With all of our strength, it won't be difficult to resist it. The difficult part is that we need to take turns guarding the entrance before everyone awakens." There were 20,000 of them, and most of them were almighty strong men. Although their numbers were far less than the tide of beasts, their quality was far superior. With 20,000 people working together, a mere tide of beasts could be easily dispersed. The problem was that less than 20 of them had woken up. Obviously, they couldn't contend with a massive tide of beasts. They had to buy enough time for the challengers who had yet to awaken. If everyone works together, the tide of beasts will be easily resisted. As soon as he finished speaking, a challenger who looked like a wandering martial artist spoke up bluntly. "Excuse me, what obligation do I have to guard the entrance? I'm alone and have no friends or family, so there's no need for me to take the risk of defending them." Several other challengers who looked like wandering martial artists expressed their opinions one after another. "That's right, we've never met before. It's against our principles to sacrifice ourselves for no reason. Besides, Su Yuxian, why should we listen to your orders? This isn't the special moment when everyone is trapped in the martial tower. With the means that we have mastered, it's easy to stay away from the beasts. Why should we listen to your orders? Could it be that you're threatening us with the Heart's Oath scroll again?" The last sentence was what they were really thinking. Why should Suyu give them orders? If that person was Han Fei or Dongfang Tianfeng, they could accept it. Both of them had status, identity, and prestige. But Suyu's status was even lower than theirs. If they were to compare their trump cards, he might not be stronger than them. Shirking responsibility was a lie, and denying Suyu was the truth. The disaster of beasts hadn't even begun, but internal strife had already begun. That didn't look good. As he stared at the few wandering martial artists who were speaking, Suyu noticed an interesting phenomenon. The distribution of their cultivation levels seemed a little unusual. There were strong ones, and the strongest one was comparable to the number one expert in the region. The weakest one was only a third-grade almighty, neither too high nor too low. There are several fifth-grade and sixth-grade almighty. There didn't seem to be a problem, but upon careful consideration, one could catch a glimpse of something fishy. Chapter 10:30. When he finished, he pulled out the heavenly orchid silver bamboo, sword backhandedly, and killed a man who had been speaking fiercely. As blood splattered, the entire place fell silent. No one had expected Suyu to strike so suddenly and so mercilessly, killing without hesitation. Looking at the corpse that had fallen in shock and indignation, the expressions of the other wandering martial artists changed drastically. "Su Yuxian, how dare you attack your own people?" The most powerful among the wandering martial artists, the bearded, burly man, who was comparable to the number one expert in the region, was both shocked and enraged. Suyu held the blood-stained silver sword, his face indifferent. "So what if I killed them? Those who harbor evil intentions and rashly provoke the hearts of others will be killed without mercy." His rude and ruthless attitude had aroused dissatisfaction. The challengers who were not wandering martial artists found it hard to watch. "Su Yuxian, do you really think of us as slaves to be killed at will?" Qianfeng pointed at the pool of blood on the ground, extremely displeased. Many challengers looked equally displeased. Did he think he had the power to decide their life and death just because he had the Heart's Oath scroll? Suyu glanced at him indifferently. He didn't even need to explain. "Don't be so full of yourself. If we were to fight, I might not be afraid of you." Qianfeng took a step forward, a confident look on his face. As the second expert of the Heavenly Knife region, Qianfeng had his own trump card and was confident that he wouldn't lose to Su Yu. "Stop it." Bai Ling Tian waved his sleeves and said indifferently, "You're no match for him, and you've misunderstood his arrogance." With a gentle wave of his sleeves, The challenger who had been killed by Su Yu on the ground turned into a cloud of black smoke. The scent of Su Yu and the black dog was very similar. Illusion. Qian Feng was speechless, stunned on the spot. Brother Su, you're very perceptive. I'm impressed. Bai Ling Tian smiled and cupped his hands in greeting. He then glanced at the few clamoring, wandering martial artists, his eyes gradually narrowing. In the world of the martial disaster, how could a third-grade almighty come out before a sixth-grade almighty? Unless this third-grade almighty had defeated a large number of eighth-grade and even ninth-grade almighty one by one. The uneven cultivation of this group of wandering martial artists spoke volumes in itself. The weak ones among them were either shockingly powerful or, like Su Yu, had defeated 20,000 challengers consecutively without a single defeat. But is one possible? How many possible? The only explanation was that they did not come out from the illusionary realm of the martial disaster at all. Instead, they had followed the crowd and pretended to be awake, blending into the crowd and spreading rumors to mislead the crowd. Now that the beast tide was imminent, a single rumor could easily cause internal strife. Puff! A cold glint flashed across by Ling Tian's eyes, and he attacked in an instant. The few itinerant cultivators who spoke just now were killed at the same time. Of the 6, 4 had turned into black demonic chi, but the corpses of the other 2 were lying on the ground, filled with unwillingness and regret. I killed the wrong person. Su Yu lifted his eyes and stared at Bai Ling Tian. Bai Ling Tian looked gentle, but he was truly cruel and merciless. It was true that there were illusory spells left behind by the black dog among the row cultivators, but there was also the possibility of people being bewitched and following the shouts. Bai Ling Tian killed all of them without a second thought. He was indeed a cruel person. A blind follower is more hateful than a bewitcher. Bai Ling Tian retracted the cold glint in his eyes and flashed a kind smile. A bewitcher is just a spark, but what really burns and destroys are the ignorant blind followers. What's the pity in killing such people? With a placid smile, Bai Ling Tian looked at the beast tide outside the tower and said placidly, "The beast tide is imminent. Let's follow Brother Su's suggestion and hold off the beast tide until everyone awakens." "All right, I'll go first," Dongfang Tianfeng volunteered. She raised her hand and grabbed, and the 2 corpses flew towards her. At the same time, she retrieved a small crystal-like bottle from her sleeves. There were many crystal-colored seeds in it. She sprinkled some of the seeds into the wounds of both of them, and large pieces of crystals grew from the inside out. In the blink of an eye, both of them turned into crystals. Thump! Thump! Dongfang Tianfeng knocked on the crystals, and a hard sound was heard. She placed the 2 corpses in front of the 2 entrances and clapped her hands. "All right, they're very hard. Unless the all-creation's demonic beasts outside attack, they won't be able to rush in." The grass of crystallization. The faces of many challengers changed. The grass of crystallization, which was only passed down in the great Oriental family, was famous all over the world. Even the long-established all-creation's old monsters were terror-stricken at the mere mention of it. Once it entered the body and came into contact with blood, it would multiply with an explosive force, turning the living creatures into crystals from the inside out. Even the old monsters who had just entered the all-creations could not withstand the explosion of the seeds, and eventually died of crystallization. The tragedy was so tragic that it struck fear into the hearts of everyone on the continent. Han Fei was unfazed. She retracted the 2 black suns and looked at the crowd. "There's still the 6 fan school. Who's going to take over?" Su Yu, Bai Ling Tian, and the few top experts of the region each took over the 6 fan school. Bai Ling Tian displayed his amazing martial arts knowledge once again. He performed 18 sealing techniques in a row, sealing a door in one go. The beast tide outside was surging, but could do nothing about the layers of seals. Su Yu pondered for a moment upon witnessing the scene. He was even more curious about Bai Ling Tian. As for Su Yu, it was quite simple. The underworld pearl sealed one entrance, and no matter how much the beast tide outside surged, it did not budge an inch. The remaining 4 doors were sealed by the top experts of the region with their magical powers. With them taking action, the challengers who had yet to awaken behind them finally had some time to prepare. A day later, more than 2,000 people woke up. They were the strongest 10% of the strong. With their presence, resisting the beast tide was a piece of cake. 2 days later, more than 4,000 people woke up. 3 days later, 7 days later, the day when the martial disaster was completely over. More than a dozen challengers were unable to extricate themselves from the illusionary realm. Their bodies continued to wither and weaken, and their auras were completely extinguished. There's no hope left for them. The battle in the illusionary realm consumes one's soul. The longer one stays in there, the weaker one's soul becomes. Not being able to extricate themselves after 7 days means that they've been completely trapped in the illusionary realm. Bing Wuxin still had lingering fears. So you looked at them with pity. They were geniuses after all, and it was a pity that they had perished here. We've done all we can. It's time to kill our way out and teach these insolent demonic beasts a lesson. The demonic energy has been suffocating me for 6 to 7 days. It's time to wash away the smell with blood. Among the 20,000 challengers, the majority were almighty strong men. The beast tide outside of the tower was nothing. Many challengers were rubbing their fists and palms, eager to give it a try. It's said that if one survives the martial disaster, he or she will receive sublimations. Could my sublimations be in the beast tide? Of course. The faction leader told me that when he survived the martial disaster, he encountered a forest demon. After he killed it, a peerless secret manual fell from its teeth, and that's how he got his current position. I've heard it too. One of the faction elders said that when he was walking on the road after the martial disaster, a demonic beast came to him with an ancient skeleton on its back. The skeleton contained the legacy of that senior. The crowd chimed in one after another, and the atmosphere was heated and excited. It was as if they would soon receive sublimations. Although the glittering jewel wonderland was full of danger, sublimations were real and couldn't be faked. Although Su Yu sensed that something was amiss, he couldn't stop them. The 20,000 challengers had awakened. They would no longer listen to Su Yu's orders, and he couldn't stop them. As expected, the few challengers guarding the entrance licked their lips, opened the seal, and rushed out first. In an instant, shrill cries filled the air, and a large number of demonic beasts died tragically. The massive beast tide was like a wheat field, harvested to their heart's content by the challengers surging out of the tide. Only Su Yu and the others, who had been secretly guarding against the black dog, didn't take any action but observed in secret. Scanning the beast tide, Su Yu couldn't help but be startled when his eyes fell on a dead demonic beast. Under Bing Wuxin's astonished gaze, he flew out of the martial tower and came to the side of the demonic beast. He squatted down and examined it for a while, his face extremely grave. Shortly after, Su Yu continued to examine the other corpses, and his face became even more grave. "Stop it, all of you!" Su Yu seemed to have sensed an alarming urgency. He soared into the sky abruptly, activated his vital energy, and bellowed. Many challengers stopped, but there were also many who were getting carried away by the killing. Their eyes were bloodshot, and they turned a deaf ear to Su Yu's warning. "What's wrong?" Bing Wuxin flew over, her face full of surprise. Han Fei and the others flew over one after another, glancing at the corpses that Su Yu had examined suspiciously. At first, they were puzzled, then surprised, and finally grave. This is the real martial disaster. Han Fei exhaled a mouthful of foul air and lifted a finger to shatter a corpse that looked like a green deer. The internal organs of the corpse tumbled about, but they were all human organs. The heart, gallbladder, and lobes of the lungs were all human. This is... The challengers who had rushed over gasped. They tried to shatter the other few corpses of the demonic beasts, and the results were all similar. They looked like demonic beasts on the outside, but on the inside, they were indeed human. Could it be that they are? The people present were all top-notch talents of the Jojo continent. How could they not have guessed it? But it was precisely because they had guessed it that their faces were full of shock and terror. Some of the female challengers looked at the blood on their hands and shuddered violently, letting out sorrowful and fearful cries. Bing Wuxin took a long breath. Looking at the densely packed beast tide, her palms were trembling, and her eyes were filled with a chilly gleam. "Stop it, all of you. Otherwise, I'll kill you without mercy." Buzz. In an instant, 9 sword shadows appeared behind her. 3 of them were solid swords, piercing through the clouds. Only a few challengers stopped, but most of them had fallen into a state of madness. They could not be blamed for their madness. After some of the demonic beasts were killed, they spat out treasures, cultivation techniques, and even elixirs, just as the rumors had said. Although they were not as high-grade as the rumors claimed, it was still a decent opportunity for many challengers. How can anyone stop now? Kill the beast tide. That was the only thought in their minds. Students of the Red Blood Palace, listen up. Kill. Bing Wuxin's murderous intent rose. But Su stopped her, sighing. It's too late. The challengers, who were in a frenzy of killing, suddenly convulsed, as if they had been poisoned. They fell to the ground abruptly, motionless. The more frenzied the challengers were, the more they behaved this way. Only the challengers who had obeyed Su Yu's command were not in such a serious condition, although they felt a little uncomfortable. In an instant, more than 3,000 challengers had fallen to the beast tide. Strangely, the retreating beast tide bypassed the challengers who had fallen to the ground, showing no intention of devouring or trampling them. When the beast tide receded like a receding tide, 3,000 challengers lay on ground. Then, a scene that left everyone dumbfounded took place. The challengers lying on the ground were enveloped by a mass of blood-red light. Shortly after, demonic beasts of various shapes and sizes emerged from the blood-red light, following the beast tide in a daze. When the blood-red light dissipated, only an empty layer of skin was left on the ground. The corpses and treasures had all disappeared without a trace. Chapter 1031. Witnessing the 3,000 challengers turn into demonic beasts and become part of the great army of beasts, no one could describe the shock in their hearts. This is the nature of the disaster of beasts. So you said coldly, there are good and evil people in people's hearts. The opportunities dropped by the demonic beasts draw out the greed, brutality, and savagery in human nature. These natures are actually bestial. Once they can't resist their doubts, and their bestial natures are triggered, the disaster of beasts will strip them of their human bodies and turn them into demonic beasts. Every demonic beast we saw in the deluge of beasts was transformed from the geniuses who had fallen in the disaster of beasts in the past. Like the 3,000 challengers, they failed to suppress their bestial natures and turned into demonic beasts. After listening to Su Yu's explanation, everyone was speechless for a long time. This was the real disaster of beasts. The disaster of flowers petrified the challengers. The disaster of books turned them into books, and the disaster of martial arts turned them into nothingness. The disaster of beasts turned the challengers into beasts. Thank you, Senior Brother Su. I will never forget your kindness. A challenger whose hands were stained with blood was trembling in fear, but he was grateful. It was Su Yu who stopped him in time and woke him up from the massacre. Otherwise, he would have been reduced to a demonic beast. Me too. Senior Brother Su, I can't repay your kindness. I will do my best to assist you in the future. Senior Brother Su, thank you for everything you have done for us. Although we are weak, we can still do our best for you. As the challengers who had survived the disaster, Su Yu's prestige had skyrocketed to the point that he could stand shoulder to shoulder with Han Fei. I don't deserve to be called an errant. After 2 incidents in a row, all of you should have realized the nature of the glittering jewel wonderland. This is not a place of opportunities, but an eternal conspiracy against the younger generation of the Jiuzhou continent. I hope that all of you will stop here and look for a safe place to hide until the end of the glittering jewel wonderland. Before that, don't go to the dangerous garden area. There is nothing wrong with small-scale exploration, but if greed was indulged, even if they didn't die in the 4 disasters, they would still fall in other traps. Senior Brother Su, are you not going to join us? The challengers understood Su Yu's implication. Su Yu was asking them to behave themselves. Su Yu pointed at the tide of beasts on the horizon, which was gradually moving further and further away. Everything needs an end. That black dog killed my compatriots from the Jojo continent. Someone has to stand up and bear this blood feud. If it was any other time, these words would sound dignified, incomparably hypocritical, and cause others to laugh at them. Right now, this scene was especially impassioned. It came from the bottom of their hearts, touching their hearts. Senior Brother Su, we are willing to lend you a hand. Whether it was out of respect for Su Yu or because they had to avenge the death of their companions at the hands of the black dog, many challengers volunteered. Su Yu shook his head. If you follow me to seek revenge, you will fall into the black dog's trap. This demon dog is good at playing with people's hearts. It's easier to be manipulated by him if there are too many of you. You guys should disperse now. Remember, try not to team up with too many people. Even if the demon dog has great abilities, it will not be able to split itself. Your risk will be reduced because of this. Faced with the rejection, many challengers pondered for a moment, then rationally led their acquaintances to leave quickly. They looked for a safe place to hide and wait for the bloody, glittering jewel wonderland to end. After repeated persuasions, even the Red Blood Palace was sent away. In the end, there were only a handful of people left. Su Yu, Bing Wuxin, Han Fei, Dongfang Tianfeng, and Bai Ling Tian. The rest of them were fine, but Bai Ling Teng, haha, Brother Su, I admire your noble character and unquestionable integrity. We've only known each other for a few days, but Brother Su has left a deep impression on me. There's still a long way to go. I believe you, and I will meet again in the glittering jewel wonderland. Until next time, Bai Ling Tian retreated calmly when he saw that the situation was not in his favor. Su Yu's eyes narrowed as he stared in the direction where he had left. This person was a dangerous character that Su Yu had been secretly wary of. This Bai Ling Tian is very strange. Dongfang Tianfeng stroked the fine hair hanging in front of her forehead. Even with the intelligence of the great Oriental family, we can't find out anything about him. It's as if he was born out of thin air overnight. 10 years ago, he appeared in the Heavenly Knife region. Everything before that is like a blank piece of paper. As the oldest family on the continent, the great Oriental family naturally had influence that projected across the entire continent. Investigating a person was as easy as taking something out of one's pocket. Of course, there are some people that my family can't find out about. For example, Senior Brother Su, who suddenly appeared in the demonic Ape Ridge a few years ago, then entered the Blue Mountain Ridge and finally joined the Red Blood Palace. His life before that is also a blank piece of paper. Dongfang Tianfeng fiddled with a small booklet in her palm. A series of information emerged clearly. Han Fei cast a meaningful look at Su Yu. The booklet in Han Fei's hand was called the Jojo booklet. It looked like a booklet, but in fact, it was an astonishing fairy-grade treasure. It contained a tremendous amount of information. Dongfang Tianfeng had a large number of people scattered all over Jojo. It could be said to be the continent's top-notch intelligence agency. Important information was constantly updated every day, and the information was transmitted to the Jojo booklet through certain means. When the Jojo booklet was opened, the general trend of the world, the anecdotes of famous people, the local customs, and the geography of Jojo could be found immediately. Moreover, the content was constantly being updated at an alarming rate. Someone like Su Yu, who had a small reputation in the blessed and heavenly lands, had naturally entered the eyes of the great Oriental family's intelligence personnel. His information was dug 3 feet deep and recorded in the Jojo booklet. The people of the great Oriental family knew everything in the world without even taking half a step outside. This was undoubtedly a condescending attitude of dominating the continent. Miss Dongfang, you're openly inquiring about my background. Do you have nothing to fear? Su Yu cast an indifferent look at Dongfang Tianfeng. I'm just curious. Dongfang Tianfeng put her hands behind her back and explained to herself, there are rootless waters in the sky, but there are no people without roots in the world. Anyone who appears in the eyes of the great Oriental family can't escape investigation. There are only a handful of people that even a great Oriental family can't see through. For example, Bai Ling Tian, who suddenly rose to prominence 10 years ago. For example, the ruthless demonic man who suddenly appeared a few years ago. For example, you, who appeared out of nowhere a few years ago. Su Yu's face was calm, but his heart skipped a beat. He might be able to hide his identity from others, but the great Oriental family, who grasped all the information in the world, might be able to see through the relationship between Su Yu and the ruthless demonic man. It could even be possible that Dongfang Tianfeng already knew Su Yu's identity. She had always been wary of Su Yu and didn't dare to snatch the flower yardmaster. There must be a reason for that. Is that so? Su Yu said indifferently, as if he didn't care. Can I be more mysterious than Bai Ling Tian? He's full of legendary cultivation techniques, haha. As expected, Dongfang Tianfeng's attention was diverted, or perhaps she had sensed Su Yu's displeasure. She put away the Jiuzhou booklet. He's actually very powerful. In the last Starry Sky Tea Party, he ranked 6th, second only to Gu Taishu. If he hadn't deliberately let him win, he could have easily made it into the ranks of the Starry Sky elites. She revealed the shocking truth casually. He's the heir of a powerful pupil spiritual body, the Jade Eyes Flower Pupil. This pupil technique that originated from the ancient spiritual body is an existence that defies the laws of heaven and earth. As long as a cultivation technique is performed in front of him, it will be copied unconditionally and become his cultivation technique. In other words, performing cultivation techniques in front of him will only lead to a faster death. Copying cultivation techniques? Su Yu's pupils shrank. Wasn't this pupil technique too nature-defying? No wonder he had 100 legendary cultivation techniques. Most importantly, Bai Ling Tian was very good at hiding. Su Yu's vigilance against him increased a notch. He's already gone. What's there to say? We have to deal with that black dog as soon as possible, Bing Wuxin said thoughtfully. As long as it's alive, we'll be in danger. The Black Dog series of tricks were truly frightening. At the moment, no one could guarantee that the Black Dog wasn't spying on them in the dark, preparing to deal another fatal blow to them. This persistent Black Dog has to be dealt with, Han Fei said placidly. I'm just curious. Su Yuxian, did your generous words just now really come from the bottom of your heart? Su Yu shrugged. Of course not. What does their life and death have to do with me? I'm just trying to convince them not to follow us and cause trouble. Upon hearing that, Han Fei chuckled lightly. If they really came from the bottom of their heart, they'd be annoying. Those who claim to be righteous often approach darkness. Finding that Black Dog is our top priority. I have a hunch that it won't give up so easily, and it's brewing even more dangerous destruction. Han Fei revealed the reason why she stayed behind to deal with the Black Dog. The 100-story Marshall Tower had continuously summoned disasters of beasts, which had caused them great suffering and made them feel very troubled. This insidious and cunning enemy was the most dangerous species in the glittering Jewel Wonderland. It was also the only species that could solve the mystery. But where are we going to find that damn dog? This was the conundrum before them. The glittering Jewel Wonderland was vast, and even a yard was vast and boundless, let alone the entire Wonderland. If it intends to hide, I'm afraid we won't be able to find it even after the Wonderland is over. Su Yu said placidly, Hasn't already told us where it is? Everyone was stunned. Told us? Have you forgotten? As the special martial yard master who can control all disasters, there's only one martial disaster that he didn't control. The last disaster was also the most terrifying one, the disaster of the dead spirits. It was an absolute disaster that even the 9 great prefectures' kings couldn't resist. Once it started, it wouldn't stop. It would grow stronger and stronger until all the challengers were eliminated. Since ancient times, no one had been able to stop it. As they thought about it, their expressions changed slightly, and a sense of foreboding arose in their hearts. The Black Dog never expected that the 3 disasters would be able to kill all of us. It was just stalling for time, and it succeeded in delaying them for a whole 8 days. So you said in a low voice. While they were triumphantly resolving the three disasters, they had no idea that it was the black dog's doing on purpose. You're saying that the black dog is in the last yard, the mausoleum? Everyone felt that Suyu's speculation was probably correct. Only Han Fei frowned, expressing her doubts. Leaving such an obvious flaw and exposing its location doesn't seem like the black dog style of doing things. That's why I said it was the black dog who told us its location. It left this flaw for us on purpose. So you said coldly. It didn't use a conspiracy, but an open one. The disaster of the dead spirits might be almost ready, and it's just waiting for us to make a choice.